Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It is 10 a.m. on November 19th, 2024. And once again, it is time for the Jeff Gerstmann Show. This is a podcast. It's about video games. I got enough beverages here to make it through the whole thing. That's my promise to you. I have made a huge mistake here this week. I have decided to reorganize my desk. I wanted to move some monitors around, and in theory, originally this was born out of me going like, well, what if I had another monitor here? So when I was doing capture card stuff, the gameplay feed could be here instead of here. It was more like, as I have been spending weeks and weeks and weeks on capture gear madness, infrastructure week, I think we call it around here. It just led to a bunch of like, no, what if I did this? What if I did that? Okay, yeah, we're gonna. And so I went and bought one of those big monitor arms that you can put two monitors on. And so I have, instead of, I used to have one horizontal monitor in the middle and then two verticals on the side, like fully prepared for giant H fights, just ready to go. And so I've taken the monitor from the left side and moved it above the main monitor. So now I have a double stack of monitors and then one vertical monitor off to the side. That, I don't know that I like that. To begin with, already, it's like, well, now I got to look up. And I think this is a matter of like, I need to figure out what goes on which monitor, because right now I've got Steam and Discord up on the upper monitor. And yeah, it'd be really great for playing DS games. And so, you know, to interact with Discord at all, I got to look up there. Hello up there. What's going on? And I don't think I like that. I like to have in Discord off to the side, and I could, you know, glance at it, but it was on the wrong side. So, you know, it was on the non-camera side if you're watching the video version. And so basically, when I'm locked in doing a podcast, staring down the barrel of this fucking camera right here, Discord is over here. It's off to the, I can't, and it ends up being that I just don't see it enough. So I was like, well, I need to move it around and do this. And so I made these changes thinking that would help. And it, you know, honestly, now that we're here doing it, I can glance up at the Discord, and that's a lot easier for the kind of dual chat lifestyle. But what I'm thinking I might need to do is further reorganize. I've got OBS on this vertical monitor here so I can see Twitch chat and my amazing face. I got a haircut. Slowest haircut I've ever had. From a place that usually bangs out haircuts real fast. This lady she took her time. She and I was like, this is great. I'm not super. It's whatever. I don't know. She asked me. You know, it's the problem with getting haircuts is you don't know what they ask you questions and you're like, dude, I don't know. And so I've dedicated myself to trying to learn the right answer to these questions. When they ask things like, how much length do you want off? I'm like, dude, I don't like, I want it to be short, but I don't want a fucking flat top. Is usually what I say. Maybe without the fucking thrown in there. Sometimes, depending. But then they will ask you questions like, do you want the back of your, the back of your neck, do you want it rounded, or do you want it squared or rounded? And I'm like, dude, what? I don't see the back of my neck, dog. What does it look like I have? What did it look like they did last time? Hook me up with that. And so it's always a struggle. It's always a struggle. I'm like this desk. Yeah, I don't know. This is feeling okay. I probably need to think about moving some things around on the various monitors and probably put Discord over here on this vertical monitor and then pop out Twitch chat, like whatever. I'll figure out a better way to go with it. But I don't know. And then my main monitor is now a little bit lower, which is fine. Seems fine. I don't know. I slept on it thinking like, I'm going to wake up and maybe I'll like it. Maybe I'll hate it. Because after I did it, because it took a couple hours of like, because this desk is covered in shit, honestly. And so like digging out all of the extra stuff, like this is, what is this? This is glasses cleaner from when I went and got glasses that did not work right. I found a can of compressed air, which is mostly empty. That's cool. A zillion of these SD card to micro SD adapters, some of which have micro SD cards in them. And now I need to decide, do I keep all of these? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, dropped one. Well, that's so much for that one. I got 7 of these things. Well, actually, one of these I think is just a regular. Oh, well, dropped another one. Well, that's easy. I think this is the 8 gig card that originally came in my Wii U that I had to pull out recently for some other stuff I was doing with a Wii U. And you just, I had to clean all the nooks and crannies and pull all this stuff out from behind and under the desks. And so it's nice, because I found some things that I thought were long missing and found some things that I just can throw away. And so that was, it was nice to do that part of it. But, you're spending, it took me probably about 2.5 hours to get it all stripped down and rebuilt back up and everything. And then you sit down and you look at it and go like, this might suck. This might be terrible. I don't know. This might be garbage. Looking up at a monitor to see stuff might not be as cool as I thought it was. But if you're putting like tertiary things up there that you don't need to look at very often, but are nice to have open, then I think that would work out. I don't know. I don't know, man. The desk thoughts. Let's take a break here and we'll come back and we'll talk about some video games. Hold tight. Can you name every single subscription you have? I can't. I don't. It's and I've been cutting way back on that stuff. But you're not alone. Did you know that over 74% of people have subscriptions that they've forgotten about? With Rocket Money, you don't have to remember every subscription or worry about forgetting any of them because you get to see them laid out right in front of you. Where's your money going? Where is it all going? Do you use these services? Do you want to cancel these services? Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and can help lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. So you can see all your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where all of that money is going. And for any that you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them with just a few taps on their app. That dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track and see your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. They'll even send you alerts if bills increase in price or if there's weird spending activity that looks out of the norm or if you're close to going over your budget. And, hey, there's a new goals feature that'll automatically save money for you without having to think about it. Whether your goal is to pay off credit card debt, put away money for a house, or just build your savings, Rocket Money makes it easy. And hey, they will even try to negotiate lower bills for you, sometimes by up to 20%. They can automatically scan your bills and find opportunities to save, and you can ask them to negotiate for you. They will deal with customer service. You don't have to go through hours of phone trees and getting on the phone with people and going, I'm going to cancel. And then they go, oh, but what if you, instead of canceling, we gave you a deal? Rocket Money will go do all that for you. That's why Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year while using all of the app's premium features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/JeffG. That's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. rocketmoney.com/JeffG. The other thing about this desk situation is I decided to move the audio mixer, my Go XLR, over to the far side over here because now the center, the pipeline of monitors here in the center and speakers and didn't really leave a lot of room for it. It used to be under my main monitor. So now it's off to the left, which is a fine place, except as soon as I folded out this microphone arm from the side of the desk to start doing the show, I realized, oh, the mic arm is right in the way of, like, now I need to snake my arm under here if I want to fade myself out like this. If I want to go, like I have to grain my arm. Huge mistakes, tactical errors, complete oversights, all that shit, y'all. It's a bummer. I gotta get I gotta get a contractor to come out and put insulation into the walls in the garage and a few other things of like from that nature. And then there should be just enough space out there for me to start moving this stuff out. Like it's not going to be pretty because there is still a lot of things out there that that need to get tossed or better organized or both. But like that's kind of the eventual end goal, because then I'll probably, like at that point I won't do this initially, but eventually I would like to take this desk, which has served me well, and get rid of it for something bigger, stronger, better, with more room for me to throw shit on. More micro SD card adapters, and I don't even know what I have. There's saline spray here for noses. I don't know. I got this Mr. Do coffee mug that's full of straws and forks and pens. All the important stuff that a growing boy needs. Video games. We're in an interesting little limbo here, where the game I have been trying to play most is something I can't talk about just yet, which is the worst possible timing on that stuff. But we'll be talking about that soon enough. Warzone came out. They started the first season of Call of Duty, and with it, the new Warzone mode launched, and I've been messing with that a little bit. It's interesting. They decided, they sat down and said, you know what this game needs more of? Apex Legends. And so they revamped a big portion of their inventory, and like all of the inventory management and backpack of I gotta get this gun and put it here and do this. They tossed all of it and just went to a way more Apex Legends system of just no, pick the shit up and use it, and don't or don't. It's way less about bags, and so and now there's satchels that you get, that if you find a satchel, it makes it so you can hold 12 armor plates instead of 6. Or there's another satchel that makes it so you can hold more ammo, I think is what it is. And so it's not about I've decided to devote this slot also to ammo instead of armor plates. Or it's way faster and way less thinking involved, which is sort of it's kind of like Blackout, the initial battle royale thing that Treyarch did, or I don't know who developed it, which studio at this point, but the first Call of Duty battle royale was sort of like this as well. And so it's simplified compared to what they've been doing, and I think it is probably it feels like a big improvement. As someone who does not play a ton of Warzone these days, this is way easier to get into, way less fiddly, way less I gotta stare at okay, we need to move this over here and do this, and I'm gonna take 2 of these gas masks and 3 that it balances things a little differently as well, by virtue of you not being able to just fill a bag with whatever you want. And I think that's smart. The new map that's in there is good. It seems solid. And yeah, I don't know. Battle Royale games. We were talking about it on the Discord last night because someone brought up PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which I guess doesn't stand for that anymore, does it? But we were talking about the era when it meant something, back when it was PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and just Fortnite, and just the way that it just got me thinking about the way that shooters, but really games in general, have changed over the last, I guess it's about, what is it, about 9 years now? 8 years, whatever it's been a while, because Fortnite is now what, 8 years old. 8 or 9 anyway. And just the number of studios, I mean, thinking about the number of studios that have just like crashed against the rocks chasing this shit. You know, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, when it first launched, was amazing. You know, there weren't, you know, there were not games out there doing that, at least, especially not ones that popular that were that appealing to that kind of degree. You know, they made a relatively accessible game. I think that's where they would probably lose out in the long run, is Fortnite would come along and make that and streamline that stuff even more, and somehow make the shooting part of it even more accessible, even if the building part of it did kind of complicate things in a different way. And just the number of games that have come and gone that have been in the mold of the battle royale game. You know, we talk about Rumbleverse a lot around here, but there was, you know, Radical Heights. There was the Final Fantasy battle royale game. Remember they made one of those? Remember they made one of those and ran it on phones for a while? But just the novelty of, hey, here's a game that has 100 people in it. Which is something that, you know, outside of MAG, we weren't really seeing player counts that high, and that just, you know, that it was such a cool change, and it was the cool change that shooters needed. But like now, it's interesting to be on the other side of it and be like, man, you know, we kind of need another big change. I think that's why we keep talking about extraction shooters, or rather why the industry keeps chasing the extraction shooter, is because they think that maybe, you know, because there were battle royale mods and stuff for like Arma or whatever prior to, or Warzy, whatever it was, prior to Battlegrounds blowing up. But that was the game that really kind of kicked the door down and popularized it. And I think that some people feel, you know, some studios probably feel like extraction shooters have been in a similar spot for a while, right? Where you had like, oh, the Division has a mode in here that, like, if we built this out into its own thing, that maybe it would be this. And, you know, and Tarkov comes along, but like, for as popular as Tarkov presumably is, it doesn't feel like a game that ever really broke through in a mainstream way. It just feels like there are a lot of lunatics out there that are playing it, and they're doing so in their own neck of the woods, and you never hear about it. And it's like they're like the EVE Online people. You occasionally hear some stories about some Tarkov shit. You go, oh, and then you go look at it for yourself and go, oh, that's okay. And so I think that's why you see studios, you know, it's why Marathon, you know, like when we talk about like extraction shooters, like more often than it probably deserves to be discussed, it's because studios feel like they're still chasing it down, and they probably feel like no one is really I generally feel that like it has not been cracked as wide open as it maybe could be, or at least that's the bet that they're all placing. It's like, hey, I bet if we did this in a really, really big way, it could be this, it could be massive, it could be our version of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or whatever. And so I think that's why we see that sort of stuff, is, you know, some people think that that's going to be the next thing in shooters. I'm not super sold on it, honestly. No one is, right? I don't think anyone has really cracked it. But I'm also increasingly convinced that maybe no one will. Maybe there's just maybe the stakes of that concept are too high for the average player, and blah blah blah, and the monetization is too crazy, and, you know, there's just different things about it there that just make it a lot more difficult to attain than you think it would be. But all that is to say that, you know, hey, you know, Call of Duty tried it, and even they figured they reached a point with DMZ mode where they just walked away from it. And they labeled it a beta the entire time, and they're like, here's our concept of this, and it's kind of like the Warzone stuff, but it's kind of you know, like extraction is more of a focus, and And the people who liked it really liked it, but it just seemed like the player counts weren't there. And I think if you are, that it skews it a little bit because obviously Call of Duty has a lot of popular portions to it already. And so if you have this kind of like half-baked concept that you're putting out there and not really getting behind it all the way, and the stuff that they tried I thought was interesting, but the way they wrote it off as a failure, it doesn't feel like a situation of just like, well, if Call of Duty can't do it, then no one can, because I think actually it's probably harder because they're launching their mode alongside Warzone and competitive multiplayer and whatever their standard third mode is, if it, zombies or, whatever else is still kind of out there floating around from the previous game or what have you. It's difficult. It's difficult to do that, So yeah, I don't know. The latest thing in competitive shooters, the new thing in competitive shooters is reinstalling Unreal Tournament 2004, which I did over the weekend and played some of that. It's a good game. It's a good game. It's a good ass game. You can get it for like a few bucks on fucking GOG or something. It's a good game. You just got a couple of console commands to like connect to the community master server and to get your game running at a modern resolution, and that was that. It's a good game. Let's take one more break here. We'll come back in a sec here, and maybe I will say that Unreal Tournament 2K4 is a good game a few more times. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you in part by iRestore, the clinically proven game-changing hair growth device that's here to help you turn back the clock on hair loss. Listen up. If your hairline ain't where you want it to be, it's time to take action. iRestore's FDA-cleared laser and LED system isn't just some weird gadget. It's not like some airline magazine fly-by-night. No, it's a scientifically advanced approach to hair restoration that you can use right at home. The iRestore Elite, the most powerful device on the market, is engineered with 500 lasers and LEDs designed to provide maximum scalp coverage and deliver the energy necessary to revive dormant hair follicles. The iRestore Elite uses low-level light therapy, that's LLLT, a treatment that has been clinically proven to stimulate cellular activity within your hair follicles. That stimulation increases blood flow to the scalp, delivering essential nutrients and oxygen to help reduce inflammation, one of the key factors that contributes to hair loss. In just a few months, you'll start to see noticeable improvements as your hair regains its vitality without the need for drugs or weird, painful procedures, expensive surgeries. It's the most non-invasive, pain-free, and drug-free way to bring your hair back to life, backed by real science. Whether you're just starting to see that hairline retreating, or if you are one of those people that just wears a hat all the time, iRestore can change your life. And right now, it's their biggest sale of the year. For a limited time only, you can get hundreds of dollars off the iRestore Elite with this exclusive link. Just head to iRestoreLaser.com/JeffG. This thing's easy. It's like a helmet that you're plugging it into power because it's powerful lasers. And then, you basically just put it on for, 12 minutes a day. You can do other stuff, read a book, look at your phone, all those sorts of things. It's comfortable. It's easy. In a 4-month double-blind clinical study performed by a board-certified dermatologist, 100% of study participants grew more hair with iRestore's laser and LED technology. So you can feel confident that you're buying a system with proven results. Are you ready to get medical-grade red light treatment at home to regrow your hair? For a limited time only, check out their huge Black Friday sale. You get hundreds of dollars off their iRestore Elite with this link. It's iRestoreLaser.com/JeffG. That's hundreds off the iRestore Elite at iRestoreLaser.com/JeffG. Please support the show. Tell them we sent you. Hair loss is frustrating, and you don't have to fight it alone. Thanks to iRestore. All right, we're back. Let's get into the news. All of these buttons are just a little too far away. All of these buttons just slightly too far away. It's a horrific mistake I've made. As opposed to having everything right in front of me, I've spread it out across the desk, which is cool because you get to spread out like you're hitting buttons, and I'm moving a slider over here, I'm pushing this button here. Like it's cool, but the mic arm being in the way. And honestly, these 9,000 drinks I have here in front of me doesn't make the buttons any easier to get to. So I don't know. Changes need to be made. We're not done with the desk, not by a long shot. I thought maybe this would be it, but we still have more work to do. I can't. The soundboard is all the way over here. I got to take a bump. It's, you know, it's a real tragedy. It's a real tragedy. Anyway, in the news, the nominees for this year's installment of the Game Awards have been announced. The show will be taking place on December 12th, which is a Thursday. So the nominees, this nominee process, the Jeff Gerstmann Show is once again a participating outlet in the judging process for the Game Awards, which essentially means I filled out a form with some games on it that I thought were good. And then I will get a list of these nominees back, and I will vote on what I think should win. And that's about it. It's a pretty straightforward process. That doesn't stop people from coming up with a zillion different conspiracy theories and weird things about, like, oh, Jeff Keighley picks the winners himself. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's the case. I look at the nominees and I look at them and go, like, these don't match my choices all that closely, but I see very easily, as someone who has been involved in Game of the Year discussions at a publication level and have seen how 20 people sit around and come together with a list they can all be happy with, or when you take votes with the types of games that get through all that voting, I look at it and go, this looks right to me. For Game of the Year, or rather, this looks on the level to me. Right would imply that UFO 50 was nominated for way more categories. But this looks like, I look at it and go like, yeah, okay, yeah. There are some categories that we do not nominate for, and that is the esports. I think there's separate judges for that or something, but like there's like the content creator of the year, which I don't know anything about that, and best esports game. And I think there's a best esports team or something. I don't know. The whatever the esports categories are and the content creator ones, that's a whole separate deal. So I don't know what I'm looking at the list of people in content creator of the year and going like, I don't know who any of those people are. Nominees for Game of the Year. Right now, looking at this list, it's Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantasio. This is some people have like tried to say, oh, I can't believe DLC got nominated for and they're trying to be mad about that, which I don't think makes any sense at all. If it's one of the best things to come out this year, it should count. Generally speaking, the rules for the Game Awards nomination process haven't really changed dramatically in a very long time. Like the idea is that, like, if you as a judging publication feel that a game made a big dent in a category this year, whether it was through updates or DLC or whatever, you could nominate said game. So, like, I could nominate Street Fighter 4 if I felt like, Street Fighter 4, the game changed, they patched it, or, they didn't, but, but you could nominate old games for any of these categories or whatever. And so, like, I don't know, there's been some people that say, like, DLC shouldn't be nominated. I was like, yeah, it should. Who cares? What? Start your own award show. Because you can just do it. So like that, but the idea that, like, hey, DLC shouldn't count, like, I think that's I think that's really narrow. I think that the way that they handle a lot of this stuff is refreshing in a way, because it's less, it sidesteps so much of the bullshit that I have gotten wrapped up in over the years about, like, oh, well, does early access count or not count, or this, or, you know, does this, you know, do we wait until the game is 1.0 before it gets nominated, or did you nominate it here? When you know, the amount of time that has been wasted on those types of discussions is trash. It's a waste of time. And so this sidesteps it by saying, like, yeah, man, if it was available for people, you can nominate it. Done. And I think that's the right way to handle it for an awards show like this, especially. I think that's just a smarter way to sidestep all of that stuff. I look at this, I don't, I have not cast my votes for this. The voting stuff has not gone out yet. I said, someone asked me earlier in the year, hey, what do you think the contenders for Game of the Year will be? And I think I sat down and I looked at a list, and then I thought about it from the like publication standpoint of like those types of discussions that I've been a part of over the years. And I looked at it like, oh, right, dude, Balattro's going to win a fucking ton of awards. Like, so this is, you know, when I get to telling you what my Game of the Year is, which is separate from this whole process, I will tell you it is not going to be Balatro. But I will also tell you that when I think about the way that people reacted to Balatro when it was released, and I think about the way it kind of took everyone by storm and all of that, I look at this and go, that is probably the correct answer. Balatro probably truly is the Game of the Year, and I will be curious if we look at all the publications that are left, however many of them are still standing. When I think about like that process and the way that a lot of the kind of legacy is it a shitty thing to call all of them legacy publications at this point? Because I guess that's what they kind of are. I think that Balatro will do quite well across a lot of those publications. And as it should. Like I did not dislike Balatro, but well, I could probably name 10 games I liked more than Balatro this year. I think Astrobot has a really good shot here, which again is a game I really like Astrobot, but there's something about it in this conversation of it being Game of the Year that just feels completely off to me. I go like, yeah, Astrobot is really great. It's a really great time. It is not. There is like but nothing about it feels like the Game of the Year to me. Like I had to remind myself, like, oh right, Astrobot came out. Yeah, like yes, that's a great game. That's a great game. But I don't know. The problem with Astrobot, if you had to cite a problem with Astrobot, is I think it is. The levels are way more about wandering around and looking at shit and way less about platform skill. And I like the levels, the little kind of controller button levels that are just like these quick hits of like platformer madness. I think that that's the best part of the game. And so when you get to these levels and it's just wander around and look for robots, go like, especially the big water level in it, which, you know, you're just like, okay, I'm going to swim around and get all these robots. And like, this was not necessarily fun or challenging. It's pretty. I think that is my actual issue with Astrobot. It's a hell of a game. It's beautiful, great music, like all of the, you know, like it does a lot of things really, really well. But I think for my tastes, I want more platforming. I want more action. I think is where I came away from it. And I still haven't finished it. You know, I kind of I hit a point where I'm like, yeah, all right, yeah. I'll get back to this. So I was actually really bummed out that when they added all the speedrun stuff, the speedrun stuff doesn't unlock until you beat the game. So now I'm like, shit, I gotta go. Now I gotta go back and grind through the last 2 worlds of this game, and then figure it all out. Bakaru was robbed. Yeah, I mean, hey, you know, I know it got at least 1 vote for a category. Not that one, but a category. Best game direction, Astrobot Balatro. Kind of the same games again. In fact, the exact same games again. Best narrative, Final Fantasy VII, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. Metaphor, Tanzio. Sins was Saga's Hellblade 2. And Silent Hill 2. Personally, I think it's kind of, you know, like in a category like best narrative, nominating a game that is that old and this is a remake of feels a little weird to me, but yeah. Best art direction, Astrobot, Black Myth, Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, A Metaphor, Fantasio, and Neva. Best score and music, Astrobot, Final Fantasy, Metaphor, Silent Hill 2, and Stellar Blade. Best audio design, Astrobot, Call of Duty, Final Fantasy, Senua's Saga, and Silent Hill 2. Hellblade 2, if you were going to nominate Hellblade 2 for anything, I guess maybe audio is where it goes, but also I don't think the tricks and the way that they do the audio in that game is actually interesting. It's like, hey, they made a bunch of crazy whispers and there's people whispering at you and they recommend you wear headphones because it's all this whispering. And the lady's personalities are whispering at her the entire game. It's different from a lot of other games, and I think that that's fine, but I don't know that I would hold it up as like an example of like amazing audio design. I think audio design is kind of a weird one anyway. I have been appreciating the audio in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I think that's I like the tweaks they did to kind of the interface audio of like the, you know, some of the noises and things that happen as you're playing. I don't know. Like it's kind of a weird one. Best ongoing game, Destiny 2, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, and Helldivers 2. Sure. Diablo 4 as an ongoing game feels kind of weird to me because I don't I think a lot of the updates they did to it were not good. So it's been ongoing. Is it best ongoing? I don't know that I would name a game. Destiny 2, I think in the same bucket there of like, it's kind of a weird fit. Destiny 2 has not had an amazing 2024 either. The final shape was good though, so that kind of buoys it a little bit, I suppose. Fortnite has had a really interesting year. I think it probably belongs here. Helldivers 2 was kind of a weird one as best ongoing game because it felt like that some of those updates were hitting and people were actively not liking them, and people were like, "Oh man, these guys are fucking it up," and you know, like the road on Helldivers 2 has been kind of strange. Helldivers 2 was also in best community support, which they I think they've done a good job of like communicating with their community and all of that stuff. But again, like not all the updates have been bangers or well received, I guess I should say. Community support is kind of a weird one generally because it's like, hey, who did a good job of talking to their communities and all of that. I always feel like Warframe is sort of a perennial game there because I think they just generally do a really good job at talking to their community. It's not on the list. Baldur's Gate 3 is. Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, Helldivers, and No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky, I mean, hey, they're still updating it. It's crazy. It's crazy that they're still updating it. What did they do? They added like cross-platform save support in that. Zorga in the chat says they need to just rename best ongoing to best expansion. You can't, because those are two very different things. Best expansion. Okay, someone was asking this yesterday. Why don't they just do best expansion? Someone on Blue Sky was like, "Hey, what about like a best expansion, best DLC?" Remember that when you're adding categories to an awards show, you're not just adding them for that year. You need to decide, hey, are there going to be 5 really strong contenders in this category every single year? And the answer for DLC is absolutely not. Because a lot of games don't do just one-off expansions anymore. There are a lot of games that are on this kind of like rolling update cadence, the live service kind of thing. Like it's a very different thing. Like it's trying to communicate a very different type of award. For best community support, the game that's not on here that I would have liked to have seen, it's because it's kind of like the one thing that game did that I was maybe impressed with, is the first Descendant. They have been catering to their sicko audience with an alarming with an alarming cadence and an alarming array of updates. That game is getting they just announced this week that they're going to work on adding jiggle physics to it because you demanded it. They have a Discord where they are doing like machine translated Korean to English so that people can communicate with the developers directly. Like every single update they put out is them going like, "Hey, we fucking hear you, man. Like, yeah, we want to do more skins like this. Yeah, if you want more skins like that, that's what we're gonna. Yeah, we're gonna do this." Like they are very attentive in a way that almost seems desperate. You're like, this is kind of wow, you guys. This is I have some vision here. But instead it just feels like they're catering to the sickos that are buying the skins. And that game's going to be the Dead or Alive 6 of like loot shooters here any minute now. It is, the first Descendant is traveling down a path. They just showed their like season 2. The updates they've done to that game post launch, I've kept tabs on it because I'm a fucking lunatic. I feel like everything they've added to that game since launch has been like not good. From a gameplay perspective, it's been like a bunch of like bad events and events that they had to like dramatically rework because they're like, "Oh, we made this thing and Jesus, it sucks, dude. Oh, you're right, it does suck. We're going to quickly change this." And so they've been very attentive again to when, like, "Hey, we fucked up our game. We're going to unfuck it." But like now it's just become a weird, like, I'm going to paint the character so it looks a little bit more like Evangelion, and like there's just it doesn't feel like a game that people play anymore. It just feels like they want to make the ladies bounce. And I'm like, man, if you just want bouncing ladies, I feel like there are so many other ways you could get that. That game has potential. Like if they had more and better content, that game could actually be kind of cool. But now they're just heading down this dark path of like, all right, man, more maid skins, more schoolgirl skins. All right, sure. We're going to do that. And you want to paint them different colors? Sure. Yeah. For money? Yeah, absolutely. We will absolutely let you paint all the skins and the default skins and everything. Yes. Do you want to buy more $100 ultimate skin packs? Okay. Twist my arm. Okay, we'll do it. Like they're supporting their community. For better or for worse, on that one. The Game Awards still does genre categories, which, if you want to get a wider variety of games onto a show, which there are plenty of business reasons why you would want a more varied list of nominees and stuff, and this is kind of a good way to do that. But at the same time, I like some of these categories don't always have some of these categories don't always have strong entries across the board, and also this is where you end up in weird situations where like Astrobot is in action adventure, but like that's not shouldn't that just be action? They define the way the Game Awards tries to define action, talks more about combat as a core component of action as opposed to action adventure. But I do think that like having best action adventure be Astrobot, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Silent Hill 2, Star Wars Outlaws, and The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, it's a weird list. It's just that's a weird list of games that don't feel like they belong together. Having Astrobot just feels like a weird game on that list. As opposed to just being on the action list, which the action game list has Black Myth Wukong on it, which as Black Myth Wukong is, let's call it like Souls adjacent. If not a direct type of that game. I mean, they skewed it a different way to its benefit, I think. But, the Elden Ring is in best RPG, which I think is fine. I think that makes sense. I think the definition of RPG has been watered down and is fucking strange there anyway. But like Black Myth Wukong feels like it belongs more likely to be alongside that, but I guess it doesn't really have the same level of character building. Yeah, my point is that I think genre awards in a general sense are bad because of this. Because like, what are you? The thing I always tried to tackle when coming up with award categories was, is this award different from all of the other awards in a meaningful way? Meaning, will we be talking about and discussing a wider range of games by doing this? And is the category clear? Is it easy to discuss? Is it easy to figure out what games belong in said category versus others? And, genre is just, as fun as it can be to have a bunch of like annoying genre conversations. Like it bogs down a lot of that stuff in a way that detracts from the discourse, I suppose. You do have like more clear-cut categories like best sports / racing, where Street Uni X did not make the cut somehow. But we do have F1 24, EA Sports FC 25, NBA 2K25, Topspin 2K25, and WWE 2K24. I might have thought the college football would break through on that one. That's interesting that it didn't. People seemed to be very jazzed about the college football game. Best fighting game has Dragon Ball Sparking 0, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, Multiverses, and Tekken 8. I don't think Multiverses belongs on a list when we're talking about best anything. And the ongoing reaction to that game has been muted at best. But how many fighting games came out this year? So, you're seeing a compilation of Marvel vs. Capcom getting nominated there. Which I think it belongs, hey, that game has netcode like that, it was released this year. Like, you could say, hey, maybe a port collection doesn't belong on that list, but also what other fighting games came out this year? Like Under Night 2, right? That's like the only like missing one here, right? Like maybe that belongs there. You could say that Rivals of Aether 2, maybe if you liked that type of game. I would say it's best fighting game, not best platform whatever game. So Rivals of Aether 2, no. Rivals of Aether 2 and Multiverses can go jump off a cliff together. God damn it. No. But I think it's why it's cool to have a best fighting game category because I love fighting games. But at the same time, I think it's hard to fill a list of 5 and say these are the 5 best. I think it's easy to pull 3, and if everyone pulls 3, eventually you'll end up with 5. But then it probably didn't take very. I guess the point I'm getting to here is I don't think it. I bet it did not take very many people writing down Multiverses for it to make this list, because I just don't think there are a ton of other fighting games out there. I think it's also easy to see why a game like honestly, Rivals of Aether 2, it came out, and it is incredibly easy to miss. For a game that I feels like Rivals of Aether 1 like was just talked about a lot more, and so when 2 just came out a couple of weeks ago here, like I went and checked it out. I was like, wait, is it bad or something? Because I feel like there's been like zero discussion about it. And maybe it's just because I'm not talking to Ben Pack enough, which, you know, is certainly possible. But it just feels like Rivals of Aether 2 has not made a dent. And so it would not shock me if there were a lot of people that were judging for these categories that just like didn't even know that game came out, because like, I don't know, a zillion games come out every day. And like, you know, like, okay, I don't know what is happening there, or whatever. Under Night 2, I think, is also another game that kind of flies under the radar. And if you're not like tapped into fighting games in a deep way, like I forgot that Under Night 2 came out, to be honest, until I went and looked, and I was like, oh right, shit. I guess that counts. And so, yeah, I imagine that, you know, there are just some games in some genres that just fall under the radar, and you maybe end up in a situation where just more people thought to write down Multiverses than thought to write down Under Night 2, and that's the way it goes. Or maybe they legit feel very strongly about Multiverses, and that's certain. I don't want to discount that. There are potentially people out there that really like Multiverses and think it belongs in this category this year. That's, you know, certainly possible. Best family game is always a weird one too. This year's nominees are Astro Bot, Princess Peach Showtime, Super Mario Party Jamboree, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and The Plucky Squire. I will say that I have tried to play 3 of these 5 games with my family, and it has gone horribly. And so it's, you know, Astrobot, the kids don't have the dexterity for it yet. Princess Peach Showtime has just enough reading and other kind of dexterity wall jumping type stuff in it that it has been a terrible, like a frustrating game to play with my daughter. Like she's been getting very frustrated. Astrobot, for as much as it is exploration based, like there is still just enough dexterity required for kids to have trouble with it. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom runs at an unacceptable frame rate, but also, you know, that's another one where it's like, yeah, I don't know. Again, family is such a wide thing. When I map that to my family, where the oldest child is 5, and she had trouble with a lot of this stuff, like Echoes of Wisdom, she's interested in playing it and will play it someday, but is not ready for it yet. It's just not a game I would sit there and say this is the best family game. It's not even. It just doesn't feel like it belongs on that list. But I think it's very easy to go like, oh well, first party Nintendo, blah blah blah, family game. Oh yeah. I think putting Super Mario Party Jamboree on a list of best family game is actually like a kind of a criminal act. That game, like, do you hate your family? Like, I mean, there's plenty of people hate their families, right? If we're talking about like, oh, the family got together at Thanksgiving and they wanted to play a video game, and they're all adults, then sure, yeah, Super Mario Party, you hate each other already. You might as well play this fucking piece of trash. In that context, I would take that the Jackbox Survey Scramble thing that came out. I think if you had a family of adults and you were looking to play games with them, I think that is a great, like it is better than a lot of the other Jackbox games that have come out lately. I think that's cool. If you were going to do something like that, if we were taking family in that sense. But as far as like games you would play with your kids or whatever, like I don't know. It's a weird, my perspective to say, surprise, since I started having kids of my own and have been able to witness this firsthand, my opinion on what makes a family game has changed dramatically. The things you think like, oh, this would be good for a family. Like, no, it fucking wouldn't. Mario Party would absolutely not. You stealing stars from somebody, like there's gonna be fights. There's gonna be like, once the kids are old enough to understand it, there's gonna be like fights around who screwed who. Like, it's a fucking miserable experience, dude. My kids will get into fights over Candyland. You want to play fucking Mario Party? Are you fucking high? Absolutely not. Not in this household. What else, man? Best multiplayer game, Call of Duty, Helldivers 2, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Tekken 8, and Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. All right. I have to, that this is another weird situation where I look at it and go like, this would not be my pick, but I bet Helldivers wins that. Just from the impact that that Helldivers 2 had on the year. Kane in the chat says, "Where's EDF?" Sorry, you maybe have misheard me. I said best multiplayer game. Best. Most anticipated game, which is just basically any game that's not out yet. As of the eligibility cutoff, which is, I think the eligibility cutoff, the game has to be out. I think this week is the cutoff. So games that are out this week were eligible. Stalker 2 is eligible for the awards. It is not eligible for most anticipated because it's out tomorrow. So that game was considered for these lists. I don't see it nominated for any of these categories. Indiana Jones is on the other side of the cutoff. So Indiana Jones is something that will be eligible next year. That's because of the way the award show always goes. They always have an eligibility window that's like, okay, December 1st through to next to December 1st is technically how they do their year. And so, yeah, so Stalker 2 is eligible for this year and Indiana Jones is not. Has there been an instance, someone asked, has there been an instance where something after the cutoff actually made it into next year's awards? Yes. I can't remember what it was, but there was some December game that made it through onto the list the following year, but I can't remember. Like, you're right, people might forget about it or whatever, but the same would be true about January games. It doesn't matter where your cutoff is. Like, it's a January game would sometimes be forgotten in those cases as well. But yes, Stalker 2 is in this year's eligibility window, though as I scroll through this list, it does not look like it was nominated in any categories at all. Take that how you will. Most anticipated is Death Stranding 2, Ghost of Yotai? Okay. Grand Theft Auto 6, Metroid Prime 4, and Monster Hunter Wilds. Yeah, sure. Of course. That makes sense. Oh, yes, right. Grand Blue was a December game this year. So on Best Fighting, that is a game from previous years. Most anticipated is basically any game that is coming out after the eligibility window. So Indiana Jones would have been eligible for most anticipated. I think this is fine. I don't know. It's kind of weird where you've got games that could, like, the more your game gets delayed, the more shots it has at this category. Like, that's kind of a weird one. And most anticipated, I think, is fine for like a fan voting category. I think having judges weigh in on it is sometimes a little weird because in some cases, some of us will have played some of these games. Like I missed the event, but people have played Indiana Jones. And it didn't make the cut. I don't know what to make of that. But like, I don't know, like the game you are most excited about, I think is like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Is it a real award? Are any awards real awards? I guess is the point here. So yeah, I don't know. Those are all games I would like to know more about, for sure. With the possible exception of Death Stranding 2. um, but yeah, I don't know. Some of these are fan voted, and so you end up in a situation. Yeah, Shags on the Discord says Smash Brothers Ultimate was a game that was the outside of the year of eligibility. So that was released December 7th, 2018, but was nominated for Game of the Year in 2019. So yeah, there's one for you. And then, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, there's like best esports game and stuff like Counter-Strike. What's the best esports game? Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, League of Legends, Mobile Legends, Bang Bang. Is that a thing? That's not a real game. Come on. You know what? I suspect that it was ruled ineligible just because of how its availability works. I don't know one way or the other on that one, but I guess I'm not. I would have thought that maybe Deadlock would have made its way to, maybe best multiplayer, but you know, I don't know. But maybe it was not eligible, due to it not technically being available, but it's basically available. I don't know. Deadlock, I'm sure, will have its time in the sun or something. Because when I talk to the sickos that are playing that game that I know, they talk about it like it's the greatest game that they have played since Dota 2 came out, and that it is a massive hit in the making. But then you look at the player numbers and you're like, whatever, it's a massive hit right now, apparently. So that's a weird one. Like, should that game be eligible? It's technically in closed testing, but like the way you get into it has been so easy and so relatively open that it's kind of out. It's kind of out. Obviously, they're doing a ton of work to it, and they don't think of it as a game that is out because they're still, you know, polishing it up and making big changes and whatever else. But like, but I think if you asked people like that are playing that, you know, like, hey, what's the best multiplayer game you played that year? Like, you know, that'll be at the top of their list. So should that be eligible? I you know, I guess not, but yeah. So yeah, the awards will be announced live on the internet on December 12th. That week is becoming a thing. I don't know that I'm going to go to anything, but I've been getting a lot of invites. Like, companies come into town and they try to hold events and say, hey, come see our game. Hey, we're going to be talking about the next, you know, season of content for this thing. Come to a luncheon and watch this presentation. It's like, I've been getting invites to things that I am looking at and going, I don't know that I'm going to actually go to any of these because none of this, may be rude to say, none of this rates. None of this rates me figuring out childcare so that I can disappear for multiple days at a time to go to these things. But we'll see. I don't know. The month is still young, but I am leaning towards not going to any of that stuff. What else? So yeah, whatever. That'll happen. I think this stuff looks fine. I don't know. Like, people get all hand wringy and, you know, like, I'm outraged at these award shows, and also I don't care about them. Like, okay. It's just an award. I think that the industry technically, I think the industry benefits from having something like this. You know, we have the GDC awards, and we have the DICE awards, and there are other awards that I think, if you're looking for something that more closely resembles, like, you know, hey, these awards were given out by their peers. Like, what this is, which is the Golden Globes that are given out by like the press. This is like that, right? Because it's Yahoos like me voting on it, and I've got, you know, hey, I got 30 years in the game. I know something about something. But like, I think that like technically, if you hear, hey, these awards were technically voted on by other people who work on games, I look at that and go, and even I go, oh, well, yeah. And then I think about the reality of it and go, oh, well, this person shipped a game this year. They haven't had time to play any of these games that they supposedly voted on. And you hear stories about like, oh, I don't know. I just asked my team what they thought was good this year. And then I voted and I filled out the form that way. So like even the DICE Awards, it's like awards are what you make of them. It's like, whatever, man. And so, you know, but you do get those forms of awards as well. And I think that all of that is valid. And I think all of that is fine. I think that they, you know, when I watch the actual awards show, you look at it and go like, hey man, I wish that, you know, maybe people got more time to talk. But then I was there in the crowd when the God of War dude kept going and going and going. And I was like, maybe people should not be able to talk so much. That maybe this is a bad idea. Like, so I don't know. You want an entertaining broadcast. And I think the thing that most viewers of that broadcast want are trailers. And so I think that it's satisfying that goal. As someone who judges the awards, do I wish that the awards were given like more time? Sure. Yeah, always. But also if you're trying to put on an entertaining broadcast that people will actually watch, you start to understand why, like, oh, well, this is maybe why you would have Al Pacino here or whatever, you know, like why are you doing this? Like, okay, well, because we want to get eyeballs on it, because we want to do this, you know, we want to make it a bigger thing. So I think it's impossible to please everyone. But I do think that the show is generally a lot better. Whatever, generally, it's way better than it was when it was on Spike TV, when Keeley was doing the Spike TV Awards. Like, that was a shit fest. Like, that was like all the non-gaming people that were able to weigh in on that show and say, hey man, why don't you put more scantily clad celebrities on this show? And it just made it dog shit, you know? So I think this is a lot better than that. And it gets everybody together in a room, and, you know, the industry kind of comes together and they hang out and have some drinks for a night or whatever. And I think that's a good thing, overall. And if you don't like this awards show, there are 3 other ones that have their own list of issues, right? I don't know. Like, that's the, you know, that's the other part of it. It's like, yeah, man, watch the GDC awards. They do that. We'll go, you know, watch the DICE Awards. They live stream those. You should go check that out. You should. If you really care about award shows, there are a bunch of other award shows to watch. You could get into the BAFTAs if you want. I don't know. You could start your own award show as well. You know, like if you think that this is a poor representation of the industry, I think, you know, there's nothing. Ultimately, all Jeff Keighley did was do it. Doesn't mean that someone else can't do it. But no one else was doing it. So when Spike TV punched out, he did it. He started it on his own. I look at it and go like, yeah, sure. All right. So I don't know. People get all up in arms about it and try to, you know, they try to make it something that it's just never going to be, at the end of the day, as a show that they are attempting to get eyeballs on and stuff. So it's like, it's in the hands of people who care about gaming, but also it is in the hands of people who want more people to watch it. And so they end up making some of the same choices that like a Spike TV would have made. Just not as intense, I suppose. So I don't know, man. I like the idea of a multi-publication awards show that is bringing together, you know, all of those publications and having them vote on things. I think that's a good thing overall. But also, even if you don't think it's a good thing, I look at it and go like, it's fine. Because at the end of the day, it's just an awards show. Did people say this about like the fucking MTV Movie Awards when they started that up? I mean, like, did people take those seriously? I guess not. Some people probably did. Some people probably got bummed out that they didn't win an MTV Movie Award because of what it represented demographically or whatever. But like, there are a zillion awards shows for movies, and you know what? Who the fuck cares about any of them? People who like movies in a deeper way than I do. Like, I don't give a shit what wins an Oscar. I care about video games, so I check out those award shows. And I'm curious about what wins them and what doesn't and whatever. But like, I think you just have to like keep them in context and go like, yeah, you know, hey. Kind of all award shows are boring. You know what's boring? The fucking Oscars. Man, when I was living with 3 college girls, they decided they wanted to have an Oscars party. And so I kind of just like, in situations like that, I was just kind of thrown in and brought along for the ride. And I was like, well, what the fuck is an Oscar party? Would you watch the Oscars? Because I already don't want to fucking do that. And they were like, no, we're going to dress up in our big fancy dresses, red carpet and this and that. And you got to dress up and do this. And I'm like, fuck no. What are you talking about? Like, what? And so I put on like a collared shirt, or I don't know what the fuck I had. I don't know, whatever. I put on something. And then they sat there and they watched the Oscars in big fancy dresses in our like burned out weird fucking house in the middle of a field, with a bunch of random people they invited over. And then after that, we went to the bar that was near the house, which is funny because it was a very like kind of backwoods rednecky kind of bar, and drank as much as people are allowed to drink by law, and then went back home. And then they had a cake and they forgot the cake. They didn't get the cake out for the Oscar party. And so one of them was bringing the cake out of the fridge and she dropped it on the floor. And was very sad about it until realizing, hey, only the part that's touching the floor is dirty. The rest of the cake is still good. And then it was like all of these hammered college students scooping cake off the floor and eating it, and me watching and going like, yeah, now this is America. I haven't watched the Oscars since. I don't see a reason to, honestly. Control 2 is in the news. Remedy gave some kind of financial details and just some kind of updates on some of their projects. The only real detail here is that it's going to be an action RPG. That is something that is how Remedy has framed it. They have said Control 2 will be an action RPG. Now we get to have a fun genre conversation all over again here. Because some publications have written this up as Control 2 will have RPG-like elements. And then some of them are saying it will be an action RPG. Which is what when Remedy tweeted out the kind of summary of their presentation, they used the words action RPG. Because action RPG would imply a deep level of loot and customization and builds and a lot of stuff. Are you like, and so you look at it and go like, is this going to be like Diablo? Is this going to be like, am I going to have set bonuses? Am I going to have like, what are we, what does that mean for it systems wise? I think, in terms of gameplay, I suspect it will be very similar, behind the back action, blah, blah, blah. Like they will probably resemble Control in a lot of ways. I don't think they mean this to say, hey, it's going to be an isometric, whatever, top down, etc. But will it have skill trees? Will it have this? And the answer to this is, hey, Control 1 had a lot of that stuff already. It's easy to forget that as you were playing Control, you were collecting elements, and it wasn't items as pure as like, here's a jacket that's +4 to murdering. It was more like, you got this element and you can combine these elements and spend this currency to build this, and this will give you +2 to this and +4 to this, and there were things you could equip. You could upgrade the guns in the game to make them more effective. Like there were trees in that game. as you upgraded your powers and upgraded your guns and all of that. And again, it's easy to forget because that's not when people think about Control. I think they think about the cool, crazy moments later on in the campaign. They think of the look of it, the story, like, you know, like it's easy to forget that a lot of those things were in there. And so I assume that means that they will expand upon those concepts in ways that may make it more, because those systems felt undercooked, I'll say. They made opportunities in that game where you would go like do like a base defense thing or whatever, and then you would earn more currency or you'd find more mods that you could equip, and so there were opportunities for you to get these things, but it was very easy to ignore. And the system, you know, wasn't really fully fleshed out. And so I look at it and go like, well, if they flesh out these systems to a better and more satisfying degree, that's cool. But then I think about it and go like, actually, though, if they have a game that is going to be as story-driven as Control was, that's really what I'm looking for out of Control, is I want to continue this story. I want to see more of this world. If they can nail that aspect of the game and then also manage to make it a game that has a replayability of a Diablo, of a what we think of as an action RPG, fuck, dude, that would be kind of fucking amazing. So yeah, I don't know. I look at that and I wonder what it means, because I think there are different ways you can take that and different ways you can think about that in light of the systems that were in place in the first game. Because you could go like, oh, well, I'm going to, you know, it's kind of like you're kind of building a character. You kind of have a build, but it was never that big of a deal. Any of that stuff in Control 1. It was never like a massive part of the game. And so if they can either flesh out that system to make it more engaging and deep and entertaining, that's cool. But if they went all the way with it and said, by the way, now this is a game that's going to get some updates here and there, and you know, we're going to figure out ways to make better repeatable content, because I think that stuff was really weak in the first game. The parts where you were like, oh, we've got to go back and defend there's a thing happening here, and it's kind of time limited, and so you can warp to fast travel over here and take care of this side quest, and it's not really important, but you will get a mess of currency and items that you don't really care about anyway. So like the rewards weren't right or whatever. If they can kind of build that stuff out to make it good, then I think that's a good thing overall. I think that could be a great thing if they make good on some of those ideas. Because I had completely forgotten about that stuff, because it's been a while since I played Control 1. I'm about due to play it again, honestly. But it's easy to forget, like, oh right, yeah, I was collecting stuff, and then when I upgraded the service revolver, it was actually like crazy. Like some of the weapon upgrades and also some of the skill tree upgrades are rad. Like as you spec out your character and make those abilities more powerful, like you get to do so much cool stuff with your powers and everything that it's that stuff actually is really awesome. But some of the mods, it's just like, here's plus 8% to your mana recharge. It's just like these percentages and numbers that didn't really feel like it made a difference. So I don't know if they wanted to make this game more in that direction. I think that could be very successful. As long as they're still nailing a really good, solid, linear narrative along the way. As long as they can do both, right? It's easy. Just do it all. If you could just do it all, then I bet you'll have a good game. But but that's the, they can't sacrifice the stuff that made Control 1 amazing in the process. That would be unfortunate. But I think if they want to go in that direction and have ways to make deeper systems in there, like I'm all for it. That sounds like it could be great. Reuters is reporting that Sony, big Sony, not PlayStation Sony, not just PlayStation Sony, but that Sony is in talks to buy Kadokawa, which is the massive anime conglomerate. Like, whatever, not just anime. Kadokawa has a zillion different companies under its belt. One of those companies is From Software. They own 69% of the company, I believe, if this is to be believed. But they own like Enterbrain, and of course Kadokawa Shoten is them, and Media Factory. Some of these other like companies that have been involved in making games. Spike Chunsoft is also them. Acquire is them. Asmik Ace is Kadokawa. Asmik Ace is long gone, but Asmik Ace was them as well. So, you know, Air Diver for the Genesis, LSD for the PlayStation. But also this is a lot of anime studios, and Sony has been kind of on the move when it comes to acquiring anime and doing things in that department. So as much as Reuters frames this, like their headline is literally, Sony is in talks to buy media powerhouse behind Elden Ring, which maybe that's the right hook for this country. Maybe that's the right hook for American news, is to say, hey, it's the company what made Elden Ring, because Elden Ring was such a big seller. But this is probably way more about further consolidating their anime holdings, which I don't know that that's a good thing cosmically, or otherwise. But Kadokawa also owns the English language website Anime News Network, which I did not know. But Enterbrain published like N64 games or something. Fighter Maker is them. The Galarian's Ash for the PS2 is an Enterbrain game. So yeah, it's a massive company with a lot of different departments that, you know, some of them are game makers and plenty of them are you know, publishing anime. Bookwalker is part of this. A lot of manga all up in there. So yeah, I don't know. That's a kind of a massive merger, I guess I would say, but it's not necessarily that's not necessarily something that they are just looking at as like, we need to get Elden Ring. And so I think a lot of people are jumping to this thing of like, we're finally going to get Battleborn. We're finally going to get Battleborn. The Mushroom Man is back. No, we're finally going to get Bloodborne. It's going to happen. It's not that simple. And this is, I'm sure they're looking at it as like, oh, this would actually be a really nice thing to have as one of the PlayStation studios or whatever. Acquire is in there, and they're like the Tenchu people. It's like the Tenchu studio. Classically, I don't know how many people from those days are still there, but yeah. This is something they're saying the deal could be announced within weeks, according to sources who spoke to Reuters on the topic. Microsoft has rolled out a new marketing campaign. It's real silly. I think I like it. It's silly, but also it's like, I feel like they're not leaning into it in the way that I would if I were responsible for this. The marketing campaign is around the number of different devices that can play Xbox games, and the campaign basically says, this is an Xbox. And then it's a picture of a laptop, or it's a picture of an Amazon Fire Stick, or it's a picture of a Steam, not a Steam Deck, like a Asus ROG Ally or something. Or like a Samsung phone. And then they're like, this is not an Xbox. This is a cat box. And it's a picture of a cat in a box. Like a litter box. And so that's the playful aspect of the campaign, is they're like, hey, yeah, here's a picture of a Oculus Quest 3. This is an Xbox that you wear, is what it says in big block letters. And so I guess they are putting these ads up in cities. So you might see them out and about if you're in some of those cities. But they made shirts. And this is where I feel like they are missing the mark ever so slightly. They made merchandise for this, which is smart, because this is real dumb. But like the thing that makes it good is that you can misuse it in so many dramatic ways. So when they show things that are not Xboxes, it'll say like, this is a pair of Crocs. And it's literally a pair of Crocs. They went out and partnered with brands to use them as a part of this campaign. But they're selling shirts that say, this is not an Xbox. And they're selling phone cases that say, this is an Xbox. But like, they should be selling you shirts that say, this is an Xbox. You should be allowed to be wrong. You should be allowed to say, no, fuck it. Let me wear the shirt let me claim to be an Xbox. Like, that's where they're missing it. It's not weird enough. They should sell shirts that say, let me be an Xbox. God damn it. Instead, they put up a quiz site and they'll ask you, is this an Xbox? And it's like, no, this is a cat. Like, you're right. I'm like, is this an Xbox? It's like, it's a phone. So yes, by the verbiage, with the campaign, by what you're trying to push, yes, this phone is an Xbox. You're right, it is an Xbox. And I think that in some ways, like, this is probably a message they need to get out there, right? Like, hey, by the way, you can, our multi-device strategy, no one has heard about it because we've never told anyone outside of people that are deep undercover into gaming. And those people already know all that shit, and they know they don't want to play games on things that are not an actual Xbox. And so they're not the people that are going to be out there with a phone going, this is an Xbox. This needs to be a big mainstream campaign. So if they're going to get out there in cities and say, hey, you can play Xbox games on this, that's probably smart. But Microsoft being Microsoft and being, the khaki pants wearing motherfuckers that they are, of course they don't know how to fucking make this good and weird. And so they're ultimately a little too straight-laced even on this. The closest you can get to having actual fun with this is they are selling a sticker sheet, which is like $10. And so don't do this. You can get a sticker sheet that comes with one sticker that says this is an Xbox and one that says this is not an Xbox. It's also like a laptop with a green screen on it that just says Xbox, which is real good. And so, now you are able to get these stickers and then decide which is funnier. Like, which is a funnier sticker to put on a PlayStation 5? Is it one that says this is an Xbox, or is it one that says this is not an Xbox? As they continue to release more Xbox games on PlayStation, I think it's probably funnier and somehow more true to put a sticker on it that says this is an Xbox. But also, yes, getting stickers that say this is an Xbox and then slapping them on a gas pump. A picture of Phil Spencer pointing and it says, I did this, and you go put it on gas pumps. Put a picture of Phil Spencer pointing. It says, I did this. And then you put that on your phone because now your phone is an Xbox. Like, they should really be taking this to extremes. And I think that would be way more fun. I think that would be a little more guerrilla of them in a way that they're not. Instead, this just comes off as the most straight-laced, like, you're almost there. This is almost really fun. But like, you're not, it's missing the spirit that if you were actually being an edgy fucking brand, you would be out there doing way weirder stuff with this than you are. It's really close. But ultimately, Microsoft is still Microsoft. They're not edgy. It's Microsoft. It's the tribe. So yeah, I don't know. Like this is almost really good, and I think you could co-opt it in some ways that are super fun. But I don't know. Either way, I do think it's like, it's smart of them to try to get this message out there, because I think a lot of people don't know. Because they've never bothered telling anyone. So starting this process of saying, hey, did you know that you could play Xbox games on all these other devices, one of which you almost certainly own? I think there are a lot of people that are going to go, oh, shit. Huh. Well, I would try that. Because if it's easy enough to onboard and easy enough to go like, oh yeah, I'll subscribe to Game Pass and then try it out. Like, that's easy. I get all these games and I can play them on my phone or my Fire Stick or my television or my laptop or my cat or, whatever. I'm a Teletubby, and so I'm an Xbox because I've got a screen in my stomach, like whatever. They should do. They should be doing this. They should have probably been doing this a while ago, but no better time than the present to let people know about this thing that you have probably invested millions of dollars in building, your cloud streaming services and whatnot. So yeah, smart of them to do something like this. The campaign itself, I think, is like close to being actually good. Instead, it feels like ironically good, but not as ironically good as it could be if they just took it just 20% further. Just like make a little bit weirder. I think that they could have done something else with it, or done something more with it, I guess I should say. There have been a couple of reports of graphical issues on the PlayStation 5 Pro as a result, presumably, of the machine learning based upscaling technique. The PSSR technology has presumably been at fault here. Maybe some of those models have not been trained very well. A couple of the games that have been highlighted as like looking worse on a PS5 Pro than they did on a regular PS5 are Star Wars Jedi Survivor and the Silent Hill 2 remake. I watched a clip of Silent Hill 2. When you put it into performance mode on the PS5 Pro, all of the puddles suddenly look like blurry, weird, shimmery messes. Because it's using this, upscaling technique that, is model based, is trained, and needs to be tuned for games or whatever. And so it just looks like garbage when you turn it on, compared to on a regular PS5 where you go like, oh, this looks fine. Jedi Survivor, similar kind of story where it just looks like, hey, maybe aspects of this just look worse as a result of the process. I feel like in the early days of DLSS, we saw some of this stuff where like, as you turned on this kind of like AI upscaling, that like the models weren't tweaked right, or this wasn't right. And so as a result, aspects of the game would look dramatically worse. Both Bloober Team and EA have said that they are working on it. So they're aware of the issue and have acknowledged it as an issue, and that they are going to work on fixing it. But yeah, this is, I guess I would say that this still seems better than the early days of DLSS, but also, this is reminding me of some of those early issues that we saw with these techniques. These techniques, when they're implemented well, I think they work really nicely. Sometimes the image just doesn't look like there's just a sharpness, and they can always like, what level of sharpening do you want on the image after the fact, after we do our weird up-res and do our, whatever it is we're doing to this tiny image to make it that we're going to use to pretend that it's 4K. Like, what do you how much sharpening do you want after the fact? And I feel like I can always tell that the crispness of a native res image is never you're never fully fooled by it. There's always a bit of blur there. There's always something that you look at it and go like, you're doing something. And then, oh wait, now we've over sharpened this image and now it looks bad in a different way. Like DLSS is cool technology that I think is putting better looking games in the hands of more people with a wider range of hardware at their disposal. But I still like, I don't know. I find myself turning it off when I can. And that's something with I have a 4090, so I can do that a lot of the time, or I can turn on DLAA or something and kind of go the other way with it. And still get a performant game. But DLSS is like it. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it shows, I guess is what I would say. Anyway, they're working on patches for this stuff. I guess in retrospect, it was, obvious that this was probably going to happen in a couple of cases here. This is all relatively new. Sony's version of this pipeline, as much as AMD has been doing it for a while with FSR, and as much as DLSS and what is it? XESS, the Intel one. I don't know. All of that stuff has been around for a while now. This is still a new pipeline that probably needs some tweaks. And so, yeah, not surprised, I guess, that we're seeing some of this stuff. And I presumably any cases like this will be worked on, because that, hey, what are you going to do? Not work on it? That's it for the news. So yeah, it was funny putting together news this week because the podcast happened on Wednesday last week. And so I was like, oh man, these would have been good stories to have this week, but they were on last week's show. And so I was like, oh yeah, I guess there's a benefit to just doing one show a week, same day, every day. You get a full week's worth of news. But yes, that is, yeah, the PS5 Pro stuff. It's a bummer, right? Because hey, here's this $700 console that you're already kind of like maybe not fully clear on the benefits, and now here you've got a couple of early examples where you go like, actually this looks fucking worse, and that stuff will be patched, whatever. But it sucks, man. You go spend all that money, especially if you were like in the middle of Silent Hill 2, and then I'm transferring all my saves over and transferring all my stuff over, and all right, yeah, okay. Wait, why does this look all fucked? Wait. Why does this look all fucked up? What are we doing? Yeah, it's frustrating. This should be a clear-cut, easy benefit, but because of the things they're doing with their scaler, and it's just a different approach to hitting 4K and hitting the resolutions they need to hit and all of that. So yeah. I wonder what the word of mouth, I haven't really seen, I feel like most people in my atmosphere here have not really had too much to say about the PS5 Pro. I haven't seen a lot of people on the Discord, it seemed like the general sentiment was, I'm not buying that thing in the first place. And so, yeah, I guess I have not seen much discussion as much as they say sales of the PS5 Pro are ahead of where the PS4 Pro was in the same time frame and all of that. It just feels like there was a lot more conversation around the PS4 Pro launch than there has been about this, which, it's easy to see why. I mean, $700 is a stupid amount of money for just about anything. Let alone a upgrade that doesn't work on every game, and you might not see, and in some cases right now is worse and whatever. Like it's just kind of a weird. I keep forgetting that the PS5 Pro came out, I guess is what I'm getting at. Of just like, oh, what the heck? Like, oh right, yeah, no, that's oh right. I have one of those. Weird. What am I doing with it? Nothing. Emails. Podcast@guard.bike is the one and only email address that you should be using to send me email for the podcast. Much like Mason in Virginia did, who provides a Blood Rain update. Mason wrote in a while ago about Blood Rain. I have now finished all 3 games, and they are just okay. Blood Rain 2 might be the best out of the bunch as it has the best combat. The most positive thing I can say is that Laura Bailey is having fun with the voice acting. Yeah. Yeah, that's about right. Thank you for the update, Mason. Seth from Nashville writes in, wanting an opinion as Seth is trying to decide between a Steam Deck and a PlayStation 5. I wanted to get your opinion as I'm deciding for a hardware upgrade. Honestly, the Steam Deck seems awesome with the versatility and emulation, but the premium couch and controller experience of the PS5 on my OLED TV is really appealing to me, in addition to having access to my full PS4 library. With how weirdly this generation has gone and how the next is shaping up, which hardware would you recommend to players if you see either as a better option? Maybe my bigger question is, would a PS5 be a waste of money in a few years? I think if you have you are alluding to having a PlayStation 4 library. And so I think if you are already deeply invested in the Sony ecosystem and have a lot of PS4 games, I think that might tip it in favor of the PlayStation 5. I think if you want to get a Steam Deck, remember that you can dock a Steam Deck to a television and play it there. It has Bluetooth for wireless controllers if you want to go that route as well. They sell a dock, but you can pretty much get any laptop dock. I shouldn't say any, but I've used a couple of just like regular ass USB-C laptop docks and plugged it into the bottom of it, and that worked as well. There will be a follow-up to the Steam Deck, but at the end of the day, the Steam Deck will still be a PC of sorts. And so, you know, the things it runs well, it will continue to run well in the future. Games will eventually outpace it. And if you were looking to hook it up to a TV, ultimately the Steam Deck is not going to be as powerful as a PlayStation 5. And so, you know, driving a 4K screen out of a Steam Deck, you know, you're going to see quality reductions there that, you know, you wouldn't see on the native screen, which is a much lower resolution. And also you would not see if you went with a PlayStation 5. So I think it depends on what you value. If you have a PlayStation 4 library, as you say you do, I think that probably pushes me in that direction. I like the Steam Deck a lot. I also can't tell you when there's going to be another major upgrade to the Steam Deck hardware. You know, they say it's not going to happen in the near future, but which I think is, you know, I don't think they're lying about that. But I think AMD's new architecture for that type of device will be hitting next year, if I read right. And so, you know, that may result in the next round of these devices. If it's not a Steam Deck 2, then, you know, Asus will push the issue with a follow-up for the ROG, or you know, MSI or some of these other companies that are making those types of devices. We will see which one of them finally takes the plunge first as soon as better hardware is available. Better hardware is not the only thing to consider there, of course, because you've got to worry about battery life and a lot of other technology there. Like, what do you do with what kind of screen size do you want? How much power draw is on that screen? Are you doing an OLED screen? Are you doing HDR? Are you doing the VRR? You know, the other things of that nature. And those are spots where, you know, the Steam Deck could be better in some of those cases if they, you know, went with the OLED does have a better screen than the baseline model that they initially shipped. But there's more that could be done there as well. So I think there's a lot of moving parts on the kind of handheld PC thing right now, but none of that's going to be affordable in the relatively near future. So by the time these devices actually hit, we might be waiting until 2026. I don't actually know. for things to like actually balance out of like, oh, now we can, okay, you know, AMD has this more powerful chipset or, you know, whatever, but we still need to figure out a way to make the battery on this thing last for more than 20 minutes or whatever, because the power draw is increased or whatever. The PS5 is a PS5. Would a PS5 be a waste of money in a few years? I don't, you know, a few years is like, what, you know, for 2027. I guess the question becomes, when do you think a PlayStation 6 will come out? Like another 3 or 4 years, probably something like that. 2027, 2028. You know, but here you are this many years into the PlayStation 5 with your upgrade. So, you know, you don't sound like the sort of person that needs to have a new console on day one. So I think there are a lot of games out there for PlayStation 5. I think it's very easy to fall into the mindset of like, oh, there's nothing on the consoles. Nothing came out on these consoles. But when people say that, what they're actually saying is the first party hasn't supported these consoles to the degree that it felt like they supported previous consoles. Because the third party companies are putting all their big games out everywhere. And a lot of the major indie games come to console. Like, there are a ton of games coming out on consoles every goddamn day. I'll read you a list here. A list of, this is just the stuff that came out. This is just the ID at Xbox published stuff like that came out, I believe, just last week. The week of 11/11. So this is stuff that came out starting the 12th. Because I get an email from them every week with this stuff. Songs of Conquest, Tetris Forever, The Rise of the Golden Idol, Beautiful Sakura Running Club, Food Boy, Harmony Chronicles, Chaos Realms Collector's Edition, Nephis Ascension, Off the Grid, which is in game preview, Songs of Silence, Bullet Runner, Doors Paradox, Dwarfs, Hammers for Hire, Heretics Fork, Irem Collection Volume 2, Petite Island, Rage of the Dragons Neo, which is just a port of the Neo Geo game, Rage of the Dragons, Smoothcade, Tell Me Your Story, Ved, Access Denied Escape, Check and Slash, Great God Grove, Laws of Machine. The description of Laws of Machine here is, in the game you control the robot DR-12 that must get to the professor to save him from the evil robot who wants to escape from the lab. To get to the professor's room, you need to solve logical puzzles. Sounds like I need to download Laws of Machine. Liberté, Matsuro Palette, Rep It, Slam and Roll, and Smells Like a Mushroom. All of those games came out on Xbox last week. So, you know, indie games, big and small, are coming out to all the consoles kind of all the time. And it is easy to forget that because I think a lot of people get wrapped up, you know, when we have these conversations in a multi-platform world, you know, we tend to care about the outliers. We tend to care about the games that are unique to each platform because those are the things that are worth talking about, because ultimately the big games are going to be everywhere. When we talk about Call of Duty, it doesn't matter what platform ultimately we're talking about. You know, when we're talking about Dragon Age, Veilguard, the things that are, you know, the things that make that game interesting to discuss are not necessarily platform specific things. And so, you know, there are maybe conversations to be had about like, oh, well, the image quality on Xbox is this, and or on console it's this, and on PC you can get it to this, or hey, the frame time on PC is all over the place, but at least on, you know, PS5 it runs like that. You know, like there are certainly like technical conversations to be had about the performance of a game on one console versus another, or versus PC or what have you. But like the again, and I think all of that makes it easy to forget that like, hey, all of these games come out on Xbox and PlayStation and whatever else, right? And by whatever else, I mean that's it. So if you were to end up getting a PlayStation 5 and playing games there, I think that that would be fine. I think that there are plenty of games out on that platform, and there are plenty of games coming out on that platform. So would you regret it in a few years? I don't, not for those reasons. So yeah, it's a weird question, but I think if you have a bunch of PS4 games, I would probably lean in the direction of a PlayStation 5. Especially right now, it's the deal they're having is not awesome. Like the Black Friday deals for console stuff this year don't seem great. But I think they're knocking like $70 off of the baseline PS5, which would cover the cost of an add-on drive if you could find one of those. Steam, of course, yeah. I mean, we read that list of games for Xbox that came out this week, but I bet many of those games came to Steam 6 or 8 months ago because indie devs take time sometimes to put their games out on console. But they just launch them all on Steam because, hey, why wouldn't you? And so there are a lot of games on Steam. There are always a lot of games on Steam, and plenty of them run just fine on a Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is not going to be the most powerful machine you could run those games on, but in most cases, especially when we talk about the kind of smaller, indie games that are not necessarily pushing the hardware as hard as some of the big AAA stuff, I think you're going to have a lot of games that run really well on a Steam Deck for like kind of years to come. And of course, it being a computer, you can do a bunch of weird stuff with it. Do you want to play Dreamcast games on it? Fucking do it. You can. They run quite well. If that's your thing. If you want to get retro achievements in Dreamcast games, a Steam Deck will do that. A PlayStation 5 will not. So I guess keep that in mind. Cody from North Carolina writes in, we kind of had a question like this, I think, come up when it came up, but like, again, asking, what is the deal with Virtua Fighter? As a 3D fighter from Sega, what does a new Virtua Fighter bring to the table that Tekken doesn't? Is it just a preference for the characters and vibes of the series, or is there something mechanically unique about Virtua Fighter? I think, again, it's the controls in Virtua Fighter are dramatically different. It is guard, punch, kick, as opposed to one button per limb and back to block. So, like, mechanically, it is a very different game in terms of the types of inputs you're using. You can throw people out of the ring to end a round. The combos and the strings and the things that you are doing in that game are quite a bit different. And it's a lot of like mix-up type stuff of like, oh, if I hit punch, down and kick, it'll do this. Or up and kick, it'll do this. Or, if I hit punch and kick, it will, like Sarah will kick her leg up and get into a stance. And then from that stance, I can wiggle my leg and counter kicks with it. And, some of the other weird stuff that they have done. Of course, it has sidesteps. Tekken has sidesteps and all of the kind of, moves of that nature. I think that Virtua Fighter handles sidesteps and these kind of like sweeping roundhouses that will kind of cover that space a little bit more dramatically than Tekken sometimes does. There are certainly juggles in Virtua Fighter, but it is not quite the same type of juggle game that Tekken has become. And so I think it's got a very different feel to it for sure. It feels, some of it is vibe, and I think I would like Virtua Fighter feels realistic in a way that Tekken has moved further and further away from as time has gone on. The rounds are over fucking fast because like the hits just do a lot of damage. Like you look at it, like, you know, Tekken is anime and Virtua Fighter feels closer to a martial arts competition, I suppose. Both from a technical nature and from a, like, you know, fucking Tekken has just gotten crazier and crazier and crazier as the years have gone on. Though to be fair, Tekken had characters that were shooting projectiles all the way in the beginning as well. They just made them, you know, very, you know, they were hidden characters. They were kind of few and far between. There's a little bit more of that in Tekken, but like Tekken is a game about, you know, okay, I'm gonna bounce you up in the air. I'm gonna bounce you for a while. I'm gonna get you to land on your neck, and then I'm gonna hit you some more, because you're still gonna be kind of bound into that combo, and I think that that's cool. I like Tekken a lot. I would say I like Tekken more, but also, oh man, it's so they've become very different things. For things that when they first came out seemed like they are two sides of the same coin. Like after all of these years of development and sequels and all of this stuff that has happened, the way that those two games have diverged. Because originally it was just like, oh, here are the 3D fighters. It's Virtua Fighter and Tekken. And you're like, oh, wow, they look crazy. They don't look like Street Fighter. What's going on with that? And they both seemed like these more martial arts, more realistic, focused kind of things. By comparison to the game with fucking flash kicks and fireballs and all of that stuff. Over the years, Tekken has just become flashier and crazier. And it's awesome. I think the stuff they've done to Tekken over the last decade, like basically for a game that like when Tekken 4 came out, you're just like, man, they really fucked this up. They are really shitting the bed over here at Tekken Incorporated. Over here at the Zaibatsu, they're really fucking it up. They righted the ship very quickly and got it back on course, and Tekken has been fucking awesome. Virtua Fighter, I think, had a similar moment there with Virtua Fighter 3. They added a fourth button. It was a mistake. When VF4 came out, they said, okay, fuck that. VF4 got it back on track. Virtua Fighter 4 is a fucking amazing video game. I was just playing it like a couple of days ago. And VF5 is even, VF5 is even better. What did the fourth button do? The fourth button was a sidestep button. They added a dedicated sidestep button. And also they added a lot of uneven ground. So you were fighting up and down steps because the technology allowed them to do that. And then when they brought that stuff to the Dreamcast, it kind of looked like shit. The shadows were all fucked up. It was not great. But VF3 is straight up trash, dude. Like I'm for as much as I like, Virtua Fighter 3 and Tekken 4 might as well be the same game. They fuck up in some similar ways where they go like, we're going to add a bunch of stuff to this game. And you're like, great. Oh, wait, all of it sucks. Everything you added here fucked it all up, man. Bummer. So yeah, Virtua Fighter, if I had to like boil it down, I think it's that the Virtua Fighter just feels like Virtua Fighter 4 feels very simple, deceptively so. And I used to have a very different feeling about Virtua Fighter, especially as Tekken got better and better and better. Like when VF2 was out, I kind of like played it a couple of times, finished it a couple of times, played against people a couple of times, like whatever. And so when VF3 came out, it was like, okay, like this game, the complexity they've added has made it worse. And also like it's not evolving the way that it needs to. And so it was a game that felt like it had a zillion moves and strings and whatever in it. But like, why would you use one over the other? And it didn't always feel like early Virtua Fighter had a great answer to that question. Because it wasn't always like, oh, this is going to be a high-low mix-up. This is going to be that, it had that, but there was a lot of stuff in there where you're like, did you really need all this stuff in here? Like, couldn't you have reduced the animations by, the combos and moves by about a third and made a game that was like maybe a little bit easier for people to pick up and play? And then by the time they get to VF4, I think that they went above and beyond in justifying exactly why all of that stuff exists. There was always kind of a reason there. But it really became about like, well, what's the thing that's going to do the most damage? And now it's more about like, oh, well, he's blocking this part of this, and so I need to change up here, and I need to change up here. And so I think they've gotten better at that. That's something I think different players would probably have a different take on that. They'd probably say I was full of shit and that early VF had all that too. But I think that by the time they get to VF4, they have done an incredible job of justifying every single thing that's in that game. And so as you learn it, as you feel like you want to get deeper and deeper with a character, it becomes more rewarding than I ever felt as I tried to get better at VF2. And maybe that's just maybe that's just because I had very different experiences, by the time VF4 was coming out, I was going to Japan and playing it in Japanese arcades. Whereas like I was playing VF2 against my Tekken friends who, none of them really cared about it that much either. It was always like, well, VF2 looks really good on the Saturn. This looks awesome. But like, what do we want to play? Yeah, we'll play some of it. But let's play Street Fighter the movie instead. I don't know. At least that's silly. Hot choices like that. But yeah, my road on Virtua Fighter has been really weird. Because I got all those games on the Saturn and liked them well enough and played a lot of VF1 in arcades and was at trade shows where the game was unveiled. And so that was awesome because arcades were charging $1 to play Virtua Fighter 1, which was a big part of why that game was bullshit. And also Tekken to a certain extent as well, that arcade operators were trying to charge $1 per play for some of that stuff. And fuck that, dude. So those games coming home, that was a big deal because you didn't have to pay that anymore. But also, like, I didn't have like a good Virtua Fighter friendly community around me. And then when Tekken came out, the PlayStation just fucking blew up, man. When Tekken 1 came out, but when Tekken 2 came out in Japan, Ryan McDonald imported a copy of Tekken 2 as soon as it came out in Japan, and he brought it over to my place, and we Tekken 2 is a mind-blowing video game. Especially on the PlayStation, where you couldn't believe that you were able to play this game in your house. It was just, it was fucking amazing. And so VF would kind of take a little while to click. And so just, but I think a lot of it is like, hey, I finally had more people to play against because I was going to Japan a lot more often. And so I was able to play it there. And then, online fighting games started to become more of a thing in that era. And that stuff got better as the years wore on as well. And so that certainly helps. That PlayStation 4 copy of Virtua Fighter 5 that they put out is very good. It's very good. Ian from Minneapolis writes in, says, out of curiosity, I replayed Metal Gear Solid 5 for the first time since its release 9 years ago. This game is baffling. MGS5 has amazing gameplay and a very memorable opening segment, the hospital scene. However, he's got a bulleted list. 1. Open zones that are completely empty. 2. Nearly every mission is blow up base or rescue prisoner. 3. Almost all of the story is reliant on having played the PSP exclusive Peace Walker game. And 4. Chapter 2 of the game involves exact repeats of missions from the first chapter, plus scattered story cutscenes. At the time, the verdict seemed to blame the Kojima-Konami fallout for making the game feel incomplete. However, with him leaving so late in development, It's hard to see Kojima's presence before release drastically impacting the final product. I have nobody to complain about a 9-year-old game, so this email is my airing of grievances. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yes. The chapter 2 in that game is like kind of ridiculous. If I hadn't heard specifics about the way that those cutscenes happened at the end of that game, I probably would have quit sometime in chapter 2. But I persevered and made it through it. I did not play Peace Walker, and so but I also don't know that I feel that I was missing large parts of the story. You're right that the missions can get kind of repetitive and that there are large parts of that game that are just you traversing through an empty environment. However, when you get there, the options and things you have at your disposal to interact with that sandbox are fucking amazing. Like, mind-blowing. It was like, wow, they finally made a Metal Gear game that played like legitimately good, and it's not just like, hey, this is good for a Metal Gear game, or hey, they've made Metal Gear a little bit better, but it's still funky in the way that Metal Gear is. And like, they made a pretty incredible game that gave you a ton of weird options. And you got to fucking get up to some real ill hijinks in that game. It's super fun. It's super fun. I would have liked to have played like another one of those if they had done like a VR missions kind of thing in that game, where it was just like, hey, we just made a bunch of other, like, here's just a bunch of more weird gameplay scenarios for you to play with all of these weird mechanics and tools that we made. Like, here's some, go do more of it. That would have been kind of cool. As for the, like, dude, I think that a lot of the conversation around that game is garbage. I thought like the whole like, oh, game never over, and it was gonna have this and it was gonna have this. Nothing that anyone has shown as like, here's what the game was supposed to be. None of that shit ever looked any good. It was always like, oh, well, this is Kojima meant to do this and he wanted to do this, but Konami wouldn't let him. Like, all of the, you know, stories and conspiracies and cut content and like everything that has come out about that game's development, or you know, whether accurate or, you know, based on findings in the code or, you know, whatever, none of that stuff has ever looked like, oh, wow, yeah, that would have been, boy, that would have been amazing. Like, you're right. You know, you get in that Jeep for 20 minutes or whatever it is and no one speaks. Yeah, it's dumb, but also it's kind of amazing. The audacity of what that game actually is and the audacity of the way that game's story is told is kind of incredible. But a lot of that story is not necessarily about like, oh, Kojima left close to the game's completion, so obviously it wasn't going to be any different. A lot of the conversations are more about like, oh, there were a lot of struggles during development about what that game was going to be, when and why, and you know, Konami's influence on the whole process maybe was a thing that could have influenced that. But at the end of the day, I think that game's basically what it needs to be. You know, like, would I have appreciated more story? Of course, of course. Did that game ever need a chapter 3? No, it did not. Could chapter 2 have been more varied and more entertaining? Sure, yes. But by that time, you're so invested in the story that, you know, it's, I don't know, going and doing more of that stuff was never a problem. It was just like, hey, more time to fuck around with all these weird mechanics, and now I'm just going to do different shit because I can. And so I don't know. I didn't really have those specific problems with it, but yes, there's stuff in chapter 2 that you go like, this could have been a lot tighter. But it's very fun. And that's something that, like, you know, you don't always say that about Metal Gear. Like, this game is fun. Like, there are playful moments throughout the Metal Gear franchise, obviously, going all the way back to its inception. The very idea of fucking around with a cardboard box and the things you can do to the enemies. And like there's playful moments. But in terms of like, here's a game that's just straight up fun and you can play these missions again and again and just do different weird shit and just do weird open world goofball business. I think that stuff is awesome. It could have ended better. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's storytelling things in that game that could have been existing things that could have been told better, missing pieces that it would be nice to have filled in. Like, sure, yes. Sure. And is that the culprit of like a game that was rushed at the end, or because, the strained development? Like, maybe. But again, I don't think anything that I've seen as people have dug through it and remember at the time it was like conspiracy theory level bullshit of people going like, well, it was clearly meant to be this, it's just like subreddit material, just a bunch of Reddit type people being Reddit type people and obsessing about a thing to the point that it was no longer fun. Even if they had a point about like, oh yeah, you're right, there are aspects of this game that could have been smoother and better and whatever else. I don't think it's necessarily worth speculating about a lot of that stuff, because you get down some really fucking insane rabbit holes on that stuff in ways that are not worth it. But whatever, man, you can crawl under a horse and make him shit on you. It's one of the best goddamn games ever made, right? I mean, it has to be. Kiefer Sutherland, again, there are choices throughout that game of just like, oh yeah, I don't know, man, having Kiefer Sutherland do the voice actually kind of sucks because there's just not a lot of lines of dialogue. And then you could back out of that and go like, actually, there's something kind of interesting about Solid Snake not speaking all that much, considering he speaks English and considering what that means in the context of the story and blah, blah. Like, there are things you could go like, maybe they were going for that by having a Solid Snake that spoke less frequently. But I think it's also easy to say like, oh yeah, well, Kiefer Sutherland is not going to be there for as many fucking VO sessions as like David Hayter is, because what is David Hayter doing? He's writing scripts. I mean, not to say that he's not doing anything, but he's probably more available than Kiefer was at the time. Kiefer had a lot of Christmas trees to attack. Like, he's a busy guy. I'll say this. I'll say this about the voice situation in that game. I don't think David Hayter would have been as good as saying "do it" as Kiefer Sutherland was. I think his line read on "do it" when he crawls under that fucking horse and you make the horse shit on him, I don't think Hayter would have nailed it as well as Kiefer did. The rest of it is kind of whatever. It could have been either, David Hayter probably would have been better. Do it. It's so filthy. The way he says it. It sounds like he wants to get pooped. I mean, the thing is, he's telling you don't have to be under the horse for the horse. It's like you're making the horse poop to distract enemies, I guess is the theory. But you can just crawl under the horse and then make the horse shit. And he says, do it. Because he deserves it. He needs it. He craves it. That sick fuck. What were we talking about? Tyler writes in from Gilbert, Arizona. Is Concord the ET of this generation? If Concord was in stores everywhere, I would imagine they had to print at least 1 million copies, if not more. Do you think there's a hole somewhere with millions of buried copies of Concord? Yeah, I guess so, man. I mean, well, they probably have not disposed of them yet, I would think. I don't know. But yes, I as someone who has a sealed physical copy of, I'm pointing at it. It's not on camera, but I'm gesturing in the direction of my sealed copy of Concord that I bought the day that it got. They announced they were taking it off. Sure, probably. Like, yeah. I mean, it's as close as you're going to get, right? But there are plenty of games that have been shut down over the years. But like Concord got shut down for, well, ET didn't get shut down, just no one bought it. They didn't pull ET from shelves initially, like they eventually did. But yeah, this is. Let's just say yes. Sure. Concord is the ET of this generation. Why not? But there will never be a redemption arc for it. Like, I think when you go play ET now, there's a certain amount of like, yeah, this sucks, but like, I don't know, they were trying something. Yeah, stretch my neck out, try to get out of this hole. Yeah, I don't know. It's not there are worse Atari 2600 games than ET, for sure. JP writes in from Massachusetts. I was watching the E3 2003 demo for Half-Life 2 and the reactions to it at the time. The real-time physics were clearly a big deal and a notable step forward for gaming in general. It got me thinking about pre-release game demonstrations and how much the medium was still growing through the 2000s, which has seemingly plateaued in the past decade. What are the most recent demos or previews you can recall that stood out to you as a big step forward for gaming and a glimpse of the future? Would it be the multitude of VR demonstrations around 2015 or something more recent? Is there anything currently on the horizon that stands out to you? So, So yes, the early VR demonstrations were very impressive. I remember going to hotels at like PAX when, Valve had just set up a room in a hotel and they had the Vive in there. I think that was the first time I did anything with that. And seeing stuff like Space Pirate Trainer, some of the early VR games and early VR demos from both Oculus and from Valve, it was really cool. And it was technology that you hadn't seen, or that I hadn't seen in 20 years or whatever at that point, right? When we were all playing Dactyl Nightmare and all the other hot virtuality games in the 90s. It had been a long time since I had put on any kind of VR goggles or anything like that. Like, I tried Sega VR the year they had it at CES. It was bad. It was terrible. And so in some ways, seeing that technology actually working the way that you always thought it should was mind-blowing. And also, it was a demo completely removed from the, market realities and social aspects and everything else that I think is the stuff that weighs down VR and the stuff that will prevent VR from getting to where we thought it might, or that the stuff that has prevented it from getting to where we thought it might already. So yeah, those VR demos, glimpse of the future, like, is maybe a weird thing, because I don't know that at no point during those VR demos did I think this is the way forward for video games. It never felt like something that was like, oh, well, this is all anybody's going to be doing in 5 years or whatever. Instead, it was like, this is really amazing. This is a really amazing experience. But it's not something that replaces my need or want or desire for regular ass video games on a TV. And so it was grounding in a way. It was this feeling of like, there are going to be certain types of games that will thrive in this specific medium. VR is the right way to play this type of cockpit game. You could see like this is going to revolutionize people that are building driving cockpits for driving games. They're not going to need to go get 3 fucking monitors to do Forza, or, you know, 8 whatever they're building for their flight simulators and all this other stuff, which is ironic considering both of those games are, I mean, Flight Simulator is out again today. I don't think it has any VR support in it at all, right? Forza also, no. But Forza, you know, that was one of the, and, you know, PC games had done this a little bit. Doom, I think, even could do it. But Forza had that mode where you could take 3 Xboxes and hook them together and have, like, use your other 2 Xboxes to render, like, side mirror, you know, like side views, and have like a wider frame of view for it, or whatever. So Flight Sim does have VR. Okay, cool. But yes, like those types of cockpit games dramatically benefit from a full 360 degree view, look up, look down, look at your, you know, like all of that stuff. It's awesome. Gran Turismo 7 in VR is probably the best thing I saw on the PlayStation VR 2 that wasn't available on another platform. I mean, obviously, like, Rez came out there, and I think that that's an incredible VR experience. It's amazing, but, you know, it exists everywhere. But as far as, like, something that was like, oh, okay, this feels different, like, it was Gran Turismo. It was something about the vibe of Gran Turismo inside of VR and the specific things that they chase when they try to render their cars in Gran Turismo. That stuff was awesome. Yeah, but, like, cockpit stuff. The Eve Valkyrie. That's what it was called, right? Eve Valkyrie. The space combat, the dogfighting game that, like, launched with the Oculus Rift. I think that is still one of the best things I have ever done in VR, and unfortunately it's gone. They shut it down because not enough people were playing it. But it had this kind of like Last Starfighter style, like you look where you're shooting, and so you're looking up and looking all these directions to try to lock onto targets and fire at them. And it was the most intense dogfighting experience I've had in a video game. It's fucking badass. And it didn't make it. And it eventually, they're like, oh, well, we finally added bot support because not enough people play this. And, oh, we're going to shut this down because no one plays it. It fucking sucks, dude. Because that was killer. Because you could look anywhere. It wasn't just, you know, because the Star Wars game that came out that they did VR support for, it's really cool. But it's not quite the same. It was the head tracking stuff in Eve Valkyrie and the way those ships are designed to benefit you looking around in all directions to fire those shots and whatever else. It all worked in concert in a way that, you know, that doesn't make sense for an X-Wing to do, because X-Wings don't do that. And so I that's a bummer, because I still think that's one of the best things I've done in VR is that Eve game, because they built it intelligently for that medium. So the first time I tried that was a feeling of like, okay, this is going to change this type of game forever. But it was never all types of games. It was, this is going to change this type of game. This type of game strongly benefits from this piece of technology. Everything else was gimmicky, you know. It was like, well, not everything, but like when you went and played, when they modded Half-Life or Quake or whatever, and you're like, did you know you can play Quake in an Oculus Rift now? You're like, holy shit, let's do it. You're like, this is a disaster. I love this, but like, this isn't, no one's going to do this. This is too much. And so driving games, flying games, that type of cockpit, mech games, things like that, I think strongly benefit from it. Still, but the ship has sailed. The install base isn't where it needs to be, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's a lot of shit like that. So yeah, VR is a really good example. Again, we've sidetracked here, but the question is like, you know, what demos or previews stood out as a big step forward for gaming and a glimpse of the future? And yeah, VR is interesting. Pregatron in chat asks, what'll it take for VR to really take off? They need to, and they can't. So but what they need to do is probably actually impossible, But what they need to do is make it so no one gets sick in it anymore. Ultimately, that's the thing, is there's going to be a large percentage of players who can't do it for the session times that they can with other games. And all of that, like, it's the ship is kind of sailed. Like, you can always say, like, oh, well, yeah, if the price point was this, and if the headset was lighter weight, and yeah, that's nice, but it doesn't change the fundamental thing of, hey, there are going to be a lot of people who put this on and get sick. And it might not be immediate. It might be something where an hour in they get sick. But all it's going to take is for them to, like, ruin a weekend or ruin a night by pushing it a little too far and then going, oh, I need to sit down because I feel like garbage, and I'm going to feel like garbage for hours now. Until they can solve that, which maybe some magic technology, but like, that's the thing. That as more and more of this stuff got made, and as more people started experiencing it and trying it out, you suddenly discovered, like, oh, there are just going to be people who this is just never going to be for them. They are literally unable to experience this. They are completely disqualified from this experience. That doesn't happen on console games, on screens, on PCs, on anything else. And so in your chase for the largest possible audience, VR is always going to be a subset of a subset of a subset. So it's not like, I just don't think it's possible for it to break through the way that people think it's going to. It just doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen, because it would have by now. And again, unless someone solves it, magic technology of like, oh, well, we put this sensor near your temple and it taps it just so, and it prevents motion sickness. Or, hey, you're going to wear the weird motion sickness bracelets that they sell at gas stations, and it's going to apply pressure to your wrist in a way that helps prevent motion sickness. You know, whatever. I don't know. If they come up with some kind of technology that can solve that, then maybe. But no, like, that's always going to be disqualifying for the entire thing. Anyway, to actually answer the question, a demo that stood out as a big step forward for gaming and a glimpse of the future, No Man's Sky is actually probably, now obviously that's a very hot, like, that ended up in a very weird place, right? But we saw No Man's Sky a couple of days before it got announced at it was at the Game Awards, right? And so we're sitting down and talking with Sean and the team that he had brought into town. And they're showing us all this different stuff. And it's in pieces, right? It's like on this monitor, it's like, here's the kind of the universe as it stands, and then here's this, we're doing this with planets, and they're showing all these different pieces of the experience. And they showed us the trailer, that they eventually showed when they announced it. But like, they walked us through what they were doing and talked about how they were able to do it with such a small team. Now, in the grand scheme of things, they bit off more than they can chew. The game did not launch in a state that made good on that, right? But sitting down for that demo and watching it, you go like, so you're able to render this entire universe, and you're able to procedurally generate this and this and this, and so you're able to do this with like 11 people, or whatever the team size was back when they were, before they had launched, the Joe Danger team, basically. And like, they had pretty good answers for a lot of that stuff. And so walking through it with them and seeing what they were making, and seeing just enough of what they were making to go like, okay, you left that going like, well, that's crazy. If they can pull that off, that's fucking insane, dude. Like that's something that, like, if a team that size can do something that large and pull this off, and at the end of the day, you know, when the game launched, they didn't make good on all of that. I think we all know that, right? That's not a surprise, right? History has proved them right, but it took them a lot of work and a lot of years to get there. But that demo, or rather, it wasn't even really a demo. It was really a conversation. It was more conversation than demo. Because they would show kind of pieces and things about how that they were looking to make it work, and the idea of where it was going and where they wanted to go with it. It wouldn't be until later, when the game was a little closer to launch, that you started wondering, like, wait a minute though, what do you do? What do you actually do? Like, as Sony got involved and started promoting it more directly, like those conversations, I think a lot of the ways that Sony presented that game is where it started to feel like it was going off the rails. You know, they would have hands-on events and you would go like, I don't know, I just fucked around in space for a while. Like, what did you do? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But Sony said I was going to be able to do this, and this. And, you know, Hello Games was there to kind of co-sign it. It wasn't like they were a completely passive part of this procedure, but I look at it as like, yeah, you know, the Sony marketing machine started getting involved and saying a lot of stuff that if it had been said in a more subdued manner, I think expectations would have been a little bit more in line with reality. Because that game at launch was like that game at launch was a get high and look at shit simulator. You know, it was just like, I don't know. I got high and flew around space, and this fucking planet's crazy. I'm like, all right. Like, I didn't find that engaging at all when they launched it. But that initial conversation and hearing them talk about, like, well, here's how we're going to do this. It wasn't just like, look at this and we're doing it and we're a small team. It was like, no, look, okay, this computer over here, take a look at this. These are things we can do with this. Like seeing the bits and pieces of it kind of stripped out is like, well, here's how we get there. That felt important. Like, we definitely left that meeting going like, well, you know, if they can pull this off, that's going to be some shit, man. Wow. But it was more like, here's a look at the technology and the systems we're building. Here's how it's going to come together in the final game. We you know, but that's further off. But here's the thing we're building, and here's how it's all going to work. So, like, looking at that and even just hearing someone say some of the things they were saying about, like, procedurally generated content and how it was going to work and how they were able to build algorithms that ensured that procedurally generated content would not be, like, straight up trash. And I think they did a pretty good job on that front, or they got there. I think a lot of it was just like, hey man, the people need a narrative, people need a story, people need something to drag them through the game. And it didn't really have that. I want to say it was Peter Brown who had finished the game. He was covering it for GameSpot. Whoever it was that was doing it for GameSpot had finished the game and said, hey, do you want to hear about what the fuck happens at the end of No Man's Sky? And I was like, yes, more than anything, you need to come over here and tell me this quietly, because there are people who don't want to know. And when I heard what it was, I stopped playing No Man's Sky. I was like, okay, whatever, man. Fuck this. Like, you're telling me that there's nothing at the center of this experience, that it's like a tacked on weird hollow little, you know, it's just like, forget it. But yes, that demo was, a demo is a weird way to put it, but that meeting, talking with them about that game, felt like a very big moment of just like, if they can pull off what they're saying they're going to do here, this is something that is going to change games. Like, if smaller teams are getting their hands on better and better tools, or they're able to build better and better tools, and they're able to use them in ways that allow them to make much larger games than small teams were traditionally capable of. This is gonna fucking upend a lot of stuff. This could be really fucking crazy. But like, even outside of that, like, the game itself sounded fucking very cool. And very intriguing, like very mysterious about, like, and you wanted to see if they were going to be able to pull it off, and a lot of that. And so I think a lot of that, as it came together, was very exciting. And then in the last 6 months or so before release, or maybe it was longer than that, but whatever chunk of time it was there, when I think people started to turn on it, it became like, you know, hey, is this game multiplayer or not? I mean, is it? And they were like, well, I'm like, okay, what are we? Is that a yes or a no? What's the story here? And you know, they didn't have like good actual answers for a lot of that stuff. And that was where it got frustrating, is that it kind of became dodgy. It became like, at the end there, it was like, I understand why you would want to keep some things mysterious, right? Because imagine No Man's Sky, and you're like, yeah, you're connecting to a server, and yeah, there's stuff happening. I could see why you wouldn't want to come out and say, yes, yes, you will encounter other humans. Because what a revelation that would be, right? Or like the aspect of it of like, oh, well, the world's so vast, you won't run into another player, and then whoops, that's exactly what happened almost immediately. And, you know, like if they had marketed it less and given themselves less opportunity to talk about it, and just said, this is the game we're making, and, you know, we're not going to answer every question about it. Because I think if you had a situation where, like, you went into that game knowing is like, oh, well, we're kind of doing some server stuff, and we're naming planets, and, you know, like little bits and pieces there, and then you just straight up ran into another human player one day, that would be kind of mind-blowing. Like, oh my God, wait, what? Like, if you discovered other humans, right? And so I see why they would want to, you know, try to keep some aspects of it a secret and whatever else. But, like, you know, they were also pressured to be marketing a game and a console launch. I think mistakes were made, clearly, right? I mean, and it's easy to look back on it now and just like, whatever, because of what that game has become in the decade or whatever since then, is massive. If they had taken a much more less is more approach to it, and not even over promised, it's that because people were so interested in it, they found themselves getting a lot of traction, and the game took off before launch in a way that they were like, oh geez. And they found themselves talking about the game a little bit more than they probably should have. If they had just said, like, yeah, no, there's going to be mystery. We're not talking about that right now. And had that be it, then I think that would have, been a better way for them to go. Shiny up here in the Discord says, my feeling with No Man's Sky is Sony accidentally set them up to fail. After getting showcased and hyped by them, there was no chance they'd say, actually, Sony is wrong. You can't do that. By the way, thanks for giving us a big break. Lose, really. Yeah. Yes. I mean, you know, you're even in a marketing situation like that, you're not going to throw your publishing partner under the bus. You're not going to correct them publicly. And, you know, it was the biggest game that they had been a part of, as Hello Games, maybe ever. And so, it's easy to see why some of those things happened. That doesn't necessarily excuse them. But it's easy to see how the narrative of what that thing was got away from them pre-launch. Because when they first started talking about it, it was this very humble, like, yeah, we're making this thing. We think it's cool, you know. And they had showed it to Keeley, and Keeley said, "I want to put this on a stage." And you know, like, you know, he believed in it and said, like, let's do something with this. Like, what can we do to announce this on this stage and do this, and you know, and but at the ultimately they were small, and I think they were very committed to what they were making, and they were very humble about what they were making. And so, you know, as a result, when that game took off and it was off to the races and Sony was marketing it and everything else, you know, a lot of that stuff got away from them. And you know, you look at it now and you look at what that game is and everything they've added to it, and base building and making your own music, and that was like 12 updates ago at this point. Like, the number of different things they have put into that game is astounding. It's a crazy level of commitment, and I think it shows that they believe in the concept, and also I think it shows that a certain amount of like, yeah, no, this got away from us. But also it sold so well that they were given the opportunity to make it right. And they did it. A zillion different free updates for that game that has made it something that I think is above and beyond anything they ever thought it would be when they started making it. This isn't them making good on the vision that they originally had, as far as I can tell. This is them continuing to build on it, continuing to make good on that game. They've made good on it. Whatever. If you still have a grudge about No Man's Sky, I don't think you should be directing it in the direction of Hello Games. I mean, I think that, you know, there are aspects of like the way games are made and marketed and all this other stuff that leads to some bad situations, and I think that's what happened here. That's not to say just hand wave it away and forget about it, but like, dude, all these years later, with what they've done to that game, and the footing they found also along the way of not just like, hey, we're going to, you know, we're working on it. Like, there was a little bit of struggle in the early days, but like, because that game sold well, they had the resources to fucking make it right as fast as they could, and I think they got there pretty quickly, and then just kept going. And they did not monetize anything on top of that. They just said, here you go. We're going to put it out on some more platforms, and, you know, hey, we're doing some VR stuff, and that's in there now too. And hey, you know, do your thing. And I think it's amazing what they've been able to pull off with that stuff. I keep wanting to go back to. I always check in on it, you know, once every couple of years. And I always am torn between starting my saved game and starting fresh. And I started fresh last time, and just like I think the thing I got really addicted to, and I don't know, it's I think it's still in the game, but I think I was at some point I just started using Cheat Engine to make it even easier. But like, it has that weird boost jump where like you cancel the reload on your gun or your mining tool or something, or like you put it away and take it back out again. You're able to basically like launch forward in a way that you are not able to otherwise, and able to boost like super fucking far forward. And I got so into that. Melee and jetpack, that's what it is. You do the melee attack as your jetpack and go and fucking take off. It's so good. But it's like a weird exploit originally. And I got way into that, and then at some point I forgot how to do it. And so the last time I loaded it up, I was like, shit, did they patch that out, or can I not remember how to do it? And I just had a way worse time with it, because just the act of moving around had become a lot more cumbersome. And now they're working on their new thing, the Light No Fire stuff, which I will admit that I found that announcement to be slightly underwhelming, just in terms of the tone of it and the Like the idea of like, hey, we're going to do what we did for the universe, but now we're just going to do it on a planet. I think that's intriguing. I think, the idea of what they can do now, having learned this stuff so well for all these years, I think that that's really fascinating. But something about the setting of that game and just the overall look of it doesn't really grab me. I'm just more sci-fi oriented, I guess, when it comes to stuff. So yeah. Tom from New Jersey asks, does a publisher's online reputation affect game sales? In many online gaming circles, big publishers have a really negative reputation, especially EA and Ubisoft. Is this online reputation affecting their game revenue in a major way? I know Star Wars Outlaws failed to meet expectations, and I can't help but wonder if Ubisoft's name being attached to it played a big role in that. If so, what can they do to prevent that? It seems like no matter how good the game is, the ex-publisher bad posts online will always drown out the positive reception. No, I in the grand scheme of things, when we think about the entirety of people playing video games, you have to remember that the bulk of them are still not engaging with game content and content about video games in a way that is this deep. And so the idea of like, oh, Ubisoft is only making trash. Like, I think, like we know that attitude exists out there, but I don't think that pervades up to a more mainstream level. I look at the Star Wars Outlaws thing as like, when I look back on it in retrospect, because I was shocked. I was kind of surprised that people were that they were down on the game, because I think it's one of the best games I've played this year. And also that it was, missing sales targets and all this other stuff. I was like, man, this game seems fucking awesome. I looked at it a little bit more and went like, oh, you know what? Like, Disney has been kind of shitting the bed with Star Wars stuff once they stopped making all the movies and started, like, there's been some good stuff that people seem to really like, your Andor or whatever. But it just seems like there's been a lot of like bad movement in Star Wars in terms of people's overall interest, that they've done too much with it. They've cranked out too much shit, and some of it's really good, but a lot of it has been met with indifference, I guess I should say. And so is it just a fault of like Disney fucking up the Star Wars IP, and that has made it less desirable? Like, Star Wars used to be a surefire thing. You're just like, oh, we're making a Star Wars game. You're like, okay, well, fuck, guys, good, nice work landing that license. Now you're gonna do some other stuff, but yeah, I think that a lot of the content they've been putting out has just not been landing with people, and so I think that's probably damaged the Star Wars IP to a certain extent. It's not like irreparably damaged, but I think people are just like down on it in a general sense. And Disney getting a hold of Star Wars and then finishing out those movies and then saying like, well, we're just going to try to make a bunch of shows and we're going to do this, and they announced a zillion things that got canceled. And so even the stuff that like looked interesting, as someone who's not a big Star Wars person, like some of those concepts where they're like, oh, we're going to do like a rogue squadron kind of, that type of movie, that type of concept in a movie, like that got canceled. I think all of that stuff probably just like weighs on it in a way that, like, when Ubisoft comes along with a game and says, hey, we're making a Star Wars thing, like that just doesn't land as immediately positive as it used to. And I think that they're kind of doing something similar to Marvel. We'll see. I don't know. Like, the people just seem a little bit done, and I don't know. Maybe that's just like in a microcosm, and the mainstream is still fine with Marvel, whatever. But it feels like Marvel is kind of It feels like maybe it's running its course. I don't know. I don't have a good grasp on that. It just doesn't feel like the interest in that stuff is there the way that it used to be, that people have finally hit their limit for like whatever fucking massive, insane universe tie-in metaverse. Like, oh, we got all these movies and they all work together. It's like, fuck off, dude. Just make a fucking movie and then make a TV show. It doesn't matter. You don't have to. The average person doesn't want to sit there and go like, well, is this canon to this? Fuck off. Who gives a shit? Just make some good ass stuff that can stand on its own. It doesn't all have to be like, well, wave 3 is going to be this and then it's going to all culminate in it. Like, go fuck yourself. Just make some stuff. You've got a zillion different characters to make stuff with. You could probably make a lot of it, but whatever. You know, the Deadpool and Wolverine stuff sounds like it was very well received. So, you know, but that's very different than like your Avengers Endgame, whatever, you know. So I don't know. Maybe they will figure all that out. Brian writes in and says, a few years ago, I started listening to The Best Show with Tom Sharpling, which you've mentioned before. I noticed that whenever someone from The Best Show is not on a particular episode, they are referred to as being on assignment, which also became established terminology with you in years past. So my question is, did you crib this from The Best Show, or does the lineage of absent hosts being on assignment go back even further? It's not, no. That's like what news shows say when reporters are literally out on assignment. It's like a television trope. It's like a long-running like news thing. Now, it's like a 60 Minutes thing, really. If you had to like pin it down to a specific show, it would be like, you know, remember in 60 Minutes, everyone remembers 60 Minutes, but they would introduce all of the people. I'm this person, and all those stories. But then if someone was out, they'd be like, and so-and-so is on assignment. Like, that's just, it's all like, that's how they phrased that stuff. It's much older than any of these radio shows or podcasts. Tamara writes in and says, my partner and I are both longtime watchers of the show. Thanks for all you do. My question is, are you a cat or a dog person? And depending on your answer, do you think it impacts your enjoyment of games like Stray, Dog's Life, Okami, or Little Kitty Big City? As cat people ourselves, my partner and I often go into such games already predisposed to liking them, oftentimes gushing over how adorable the cats are, but I wasn't sure how much such a thing could have an impact if that's not the case. I guess, I mean, if I got to pick one, I'm a cat person. We had dogs initially when I was a little kid. There was a guard dog at my parents' shop that, got really bad at guarding stuff and got really good at, eating. So it was this, fattening up Doberman that had all this attack dog training. That just became a very lovable dude. And like my grandparents had dogs on their farm and stuff like that. So, but when I got into junior high, I was friends with a guy whose cat had kittens, and I wanted one, and we got one. And since then, I would say I'm way more of a cat guy. My wife had a cat when I met her, and so when she moved in, the cat moved in too, and that cat passed away 5-ish years ago. 5, maybe, yeah, around 5 years ago, let's say. And that's right around the time that we started having kids, and so I suspect someday we will probably get more pets. The kids will probably want that, and we'll figure it out. But probably I would envision us getting cats. I don't want a dog. I'm okay with dogs, but like I'm kind of whatever about dogs these days. Do I think it impacts my enjoyment of games like Stray? I don't think I go into them like I like cats fine, but I'm not like, Yeah, I don't know that that necessarily has any impact on video game animals. I think Stray is a gigantic bummer of a video game. I think just what that game did and the way that game ends and the story that game tells and the mechanics of it top to bottom, I think Stray is intensely disappointing. I think that people went nuts for that game. Maybe they were cat people. They're like, oh, look at the cat. Like, yeah, look at the cat. It's a shame that all these fucking, everything about this game is boring as fucking fuck. Like, it's a really interesting looking world that you do jack shit with. And then the end of it, you're like, yeah, okay, done. Just supremely disappointed with Stray. Okami's good. Okami almost doesn't register as a dog to me. Okami is like a spirit wolf or some weird thing. You know, it's like, I don't know. Okami is Okami. So it doesn't necessarily register as a cat or a dog game. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not necessarily looking. I don't want games where you can pet the fucking dog. I think like the idea of like, well, we got to make sure that people can pet the dog because someone's going to ask. Someone's going to ask if you can pet the dog in the game, and we better do it. There's the Twitter account about petting the dog. We got to make like there was that window there where people were getting free marketing because they could say, "Oh, you can pet the dog in this game." Fuck that shit. Spend your time doing something actually cool. Fuck the dog. You don't need to be able to pet the dog. We've done it. I've pet enough dogs in video games that unless that is something that is like germane to the game itself, I don't empty interactions with dogs where like, yeah, you can pet the dog. Hey, look, you can walk up to this thing and hit a button and then the animation plays. Like, sure, great, awesome. Yay. We've done it. It's not a thing. Do more with the dog. Make the dog roll over and let me scratch its belly. Something, you know, something. But like the idea that like, you know, the developers in some cases, I've definitely seen people feel like that they were almost guilted into adding functionality so you could pet the dog. They were like, oh, that wasn't in there. But then it's like a bunch of people fucking asked because it became a dumb fucking meme. And now I had to fucking spend 2 weeks making it so you could pet the fucking dog. Stop wasting developers' time. Just do something else, you know? Like it's not like who cares? Who cares? Go pet real dogs. Go volunteer at a shelter and hang out with real dogs. If you can't have a real dog in your life, you don't need to fucking go hit fucking F to pay respects to a dog. Get over it. We're past it now. Anyway. That's going to do it for the show. Thanks everybody for writing in. Kyle wrote in to say, yes, the first Descendant is adding jiggle physics. And yes, they are. I don't approve. I don't approve. What if instead they made the game better? That's another case. Like, I mean, you got people, you know, the sickos playing the first Descendant are like, finally, they can make the boobs move. Make that ass shake. The video game. And they're going to add it because players of that game demanded it. But you know what that game actually needs? Fucking post-game, post-story content that is fun to engage with. You know what that game needs? Actual video game. It needs more actual video game in it because I finished the actual video game that was in it and everything they put out in season 1 was not fun to play. So I don't play it anymore. I could be monetized. I could be buying cool skins if there was cool stuff for me to do. But I did all. And everything you added since then has been bad. And now you're out there saying, like, we're going to make them shake it. Going to make them shake it, baby. Nah, son. Don't pet the dogs. Don't pet the ladies. The ladies can touch you. You cannot touch the ladies. We'll be back next week with another episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Hit up the Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. And I'll be back later this week with more. The Wednesday schedule, maybe. I need to double check on some stuff. Might not be around on Wednesday. But I don't know. So I'll see you soon.